Good evening and welcome to the July 1st meeting of the Richmond Selectboard, the first of our two monthly select board meetings for the month of July. Before we begin, would anybody joining either in person or virtually care to make a public comment? Mary Houle.
Thank you. Mary Houle. I'm wearing my cleanest dirty clothes, so forgive me. I've been out working in the garden all day. I've got 5 quick items. And this first one has been brought to your attention, but it's a no-name person. It's a teenager, if you will, riding an electric bike. And to my belief, it has become menacing. He tried to pass me. He tried to pass me on the right with his bicycle.
Where was
in a 25-mile-an-hour zone?
Okay.
On Cochrane?
On Cochrane Road. He tried to pass me on the right. So the other thing that he does is he goes out into the other lane of traffic and turns around without any warning, without any signal. And I can't tell you his registration number. I can't tell you the make and model of his bike. I can't tell you anything else about him. But this is not the first time. And I don't care about anything else as it relates to people on bicycles. I'm very careful. But when somebody on a bike passes a vehicle on the right that's going 25 miles an hour, I have an issue with that. Number 2, there's 2 water issues that need to be brought to somebody's attention. I know a lot of people are aware of it, but something has to be done. I don't want to be the one to make the phone call. The Willis Westall Meadow has become a wetlands, and the state of Vermont caused it. And I appreciate the fact that the select board did not give away money to the conservation fund to figure out who done it. Because if I had done it, or if you had done it, or anyone else had done it, or say a farmer, the EPA and the state of Vermont would be all over you like shit and stink. And then on the railroad side, that field has been congested with water. That's a federal issue. And that railroad was not constructed to hold back water. That railroad bed was constructed to hold up the railroad bed. Somebody needs to make a phone call to the feds and get it taken care of. I'll end on a happy note, but the one is not so happy. I have asked before to put a sign on the front lawn, and the sign, and I understand the sign on the front lawn says Black Lives Matter, which they do, but so do every other life. And I would like permission from the select board to put a sign up that simply says abortion stops a beating heart. Both the sign that's on the front lawn and what I just said, those 4 words, are both true. So let me know what I have to do to get that approved for the front lawn. Seems like that sign is creeping closer and closer to the town's right of way. And last, the maple tree out here beside where the Hughes used to live is a tree that I planted. Mary Houle, planted that tree. Jacqueline and I went up to his property and got a maple tree that was not an Acer maple. And it kept blowing over. So I thought, that's it. I went home, got one of my maple trees and transplanted it here. It didn't blow over. But that tree does not belong to that house. If that house decides they're going to claim that tree, I will come and cut it down. I will cut the tree down. So that's it. Thank you very much.
Just a quick follow-up. Which tree is that?
The maple, right out here.
On which property?
On the town property.
Okay.
The only other place I other than town property, the only other place I plant trees, my place. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary.
Thanks for public comment.
Yes.
I'm happy to share public comment in my capacity as a member of the July 4th committee and not as select board chair. We need more people for the karaoke contest.
I would be happy to help.
Last year we had about 25 people sign up. As of today, we have 10. And I know people said last year how much fun it was. So I put on my very best karaoke shirt, just to encourage people to sign up. The form is on the town website on the July 4th page. If you need any help finding it, please let me know.
Thank you, Jay.
Are you getting flaggers? You got the flaggers you need? We're gonna see. We've got 3 and we could use some more.
Just a maintenance issue to ask you to please address, and I'm sorry I didn't bring it up before now. I thought it might have gotten to your list of things to do this year. The graffiti on the bridge,
Which bridge?
the
Oh, the
red bridge
Bridge
over
Street
here, the Bridge Street Bridge. It's been there for a number of years now. And I'm just curious to see, is there any plan to paint the graffiti on the bridge? And take care of the bridge versus, I mean, if you want the citizens to get a roller and do it, then just let us know and we'll get some volunteers out there. I'm not gonna karaoke, but I can use a roller.
I
Thanks.
can't carry a tune, but I can carry a brush.
Yep.
Roller, preferred roller.
I want to second what Kara said. There's a concept that you may have heard of, the broken window theory. If you don't fix broken windows, everything else tends to kind of go downhill. And the graffiti's been there for years, but I'm not a huge graffiti fan. If we can get out there without spinning an arm and a leg, I'd like to see that done.
I talked to Pete about it a while ago and I'll follow back up with him again. I know there's a special paint that I believe we have some left over from the last time the bridge was painted when the truck ran into it. But I'll remind him again and try to get on the list.
Gary?
Follow up on that. So a year ago, I contacted the Tyler, the engineer.
Yeah.
And asked him to email me the specs, and I offered to paint that. He did send it to me. I lost the email. I'm sure I can find it if I really look. Cause I'm willing to paint as well. It's as long as they don't start doing it up on top of the bridge or something.
If we get the specs, I can order the paint and. if you're
Okay,
willing to
I'll get
paint,
that,
would,
yeah.
I'm sure help Pete out. We just make sure we're keeping you safe.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, great. I'll dig out that email.
Okay, yeah.
I'm
then let's
sure I still
communicate and
have it.
Figure it out.
Okay.
Thanks, Gary.
And you're welcome to paint too, Karen. I don't wanna take your job away.
Actually, the contractors on the interstate new abutments, they removed the graffiti that was there. So I think if they can, if the state can remove graffiti, the contractors, then I think we should be able to.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
I'll write you a permission slip.
And I did notice that the graffiti on the back of the wastewater treatment plant has been removed. So thank you to whoever did that.
Back the band shell.
Yep, that got painted over, I think, a couple weeks ago.
Thank you.
We hired the contractor to come do that, so,
Thank you.
yep.
Any other public comment? Seeing none, hearing none, moving on. Okay. Josh Board, any additions or deletions or modifications to tonight's agenda?
Mr. Chairman, a citizen contacted me to ask that item J may be moved up to or near the top.
Okay. Anybody have any objection to moving J to the top of the agenda?
Item J? No.
Did I say number?
No,
You
you
just
said
said
J.
J.
Oh.
And so she's looking at.
I think
me.
you said that. No.
Okay. Let's just put that right below A in case Matt's with us tonight. I don't see, oh, he is with us. Okay. So it'd be A, J, B. Okay, moving into the warrant agenda, item A, consideration of making an appointment to the Development Review Board. So Matt Parisi has applied to be appointed to the DRB. His application is included in the packet. And there is one vacancy with a term that runs until 2027. Matt, I see you're with us tonight. You don't have to, no pressure, but if you wanted to take the time to talk to us, you're more than welcome to.
Hi, good evening. Sure. I guess I'm applied to this because I joined the housing committee back in November. The zoning administrator shared with me that there was an opening and he thought I'd be a good fit for it. And I think it's kind of right up my alley. We own a couple of rentals in Richmond. I've done a fair amount of development in Winooski. And I was the first person to take advantage of the recent zoning changes in the village residential zoning district. I own a small residential development company that primarily focuses on small new construction, affordable housing, and renovating older homes. So been doing it for about 8 years now. Own about 30 rental units. Have built about 12 homes in the past 4 years. So yeah.
Thank you, Matt. Any questions or comments for Matt?
Mr. Chairman, from looking at Matt's application and his resume, he certainly does seem to have a great deal of experience interacting with planning and zoning departments and serving as a developer. He would seem to be a very well qualified candidate for the DRB.
Question. Matt, do you have, at some point, you're gonna be competing with yourself, as a DRB member, if you get appointed to that, and as a developer. How do you draw that line?
Well, I'm not sure how we're in competition as opposed to, at least given the current environment, it's more likely we need to work together. We all know this about Richmond. It's kind of a big problem. There's actually not a great deal of development that can occur here. We're all working on ways to do that. We've discussed ways in the housing committee to do that. But it is rather limited. So I imagine any kind of how do I say this? Any kind of way that I'm, involved in a development in Richmond, I would obviously excuse myself from, a conflict of interest, essentially, from any kind of, meeting board. I mean, I'm going to actually be applying for a permit here that's going to go through a PUD process for the property I just built the house on. So obviously I would excuse myself from that, any kind of voting or anything, so on and so forth. So yeah, I think there's that. Currently we're building homes in Starksboro right now, so I don't have anything planned in Richmond. I'd love to do stuff in Richmond, but there's nothing really currently on the horizon yet.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we appoint Mr. Matt Parisi to the Development Review Board to fill a vacant seat with a term that expires in 2027.
Mrs. Lisa, I'll second.
Thank you, Jay. Thank you, Lisa. Motion made by Jay first, seconded by Lisa Miller. This is a motion to appoint Matt Parisi to the Development Review Board to fill a vacant seat with a term that expires in 2027. Any further discussion? Mary?
I welcome this gentleman to be on the board because it's the first time that I've heard anyone that has this qualification to come forward in a proactive way to support affordable housing and housing in general. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Okay, calling the motion to a vote. Please identify yourself and signify your vote.
Lisa, aye.
Jay, aye. Adam?
Oh, Adam, aye.
David, aye. Thank you, Matt. Welcome aboard.
Everyone in the room.
Thank you.
And,
Hi, Adam.
Hey, Matt, how are you?
Appreciate it.
Okay, so now we're going to go to J, which is consideration of setting the fiscal year 25 municipal tax rate. So before Josh gives us all the information on this, just remember this is the municipal tax rate, not the education tax. Municipal tax is between 20 and 30% of your total tax bill. The town of Richmond collects all the taxes, but then we pass along the education tax to the school district. We're only responsible for the municipal tax rate, which is the functioning of town government, police services, highway, etc. Take it away, Josh.
All right, thanks, David. So sort of a brief overview of how we calculate municipal tax rate. So we take the total amount that needs to be raised for the general fund. So this is the total general fund budget less expected revenues. So there's certain things in there that we expect from different grants or different revenue sources. You take that out. So the total to be raised from taxes for the general fund is $2,001,167. In highway, the total amount to be raised from taxes is $1,849,945. I should note that in the general fund, we also added in the amount that was approved at town meeting to go to the charitable appropriations. There was, I think, 9 different items, and we added that into the amount to be raised to go back towards the general fund. Conservation Reserve Fund also passed a town meeting. That's a 1% tax on the grand list. So the total amount of that is $79,359, a total of about $3.9 million. For the tax rate based on the grand list value of 7.9, you get a 0.4953 tax rate. Then we also have to raise a little bit of additional money for exemptions for veterans and Richmond Terrace. Veterans exemptions, they get a $10,000 discount. They can reduce their property value by $10,000. Sorry. they reduced our total taxes by $10,000 based on, it's through the state, so that's approved, and that's part of what goes into the education list. The town of Richmond increased that to an additional $30,000. So that's not funded by the state. So that $30,000 reduction in property value has to be made up for by the taxpayers. There's also an additional Richmond Terrace exemption that was approved by the voters, and that is also added up. So that's an additional 0.0016 on the tax rate, which brings us to our total tax rate of 0.4969. The prior year approved tax rate was 0.4682, so this is a change of 0.0287.
Questions? Okay,
I can see Lisa is formulating a
I-
question.
Somewhere I saw a 6.1% rate, but that's not what this.
So so
Where is that?
that might have been in the budget as presented to the voters, and basically what we did on that was doing our best estimate. Sometimes things like the grand list value will change, and so that, I think the grand list value went up a little bit, so that the tax rate probably went down. But then we also didn't include the conservation reserve fund or the charitable appropriations. So even with the grand list going up, those two things adding in probably increased a little bit more than the 6%.
So we're on a par with last year? Is that? what,
Well, we are a little higher.
A little higher.
Yeah.
We're about 3%, just shy
Oh,
of,
that's not a percentage. I didn't do the percentage.
no, that's actual cents.
That's
Okay.
actual cents. It went up.
How is, math is hard. What does that work out in terms of a percent?
ask the engineer.
That'd be me.
Let's see. So we can do,
So while we're computing, I'm just gonna make a statement. There's been a lot of talk about people's taxes going up because their assessments went up. Why I can see the connecting of the dots there. Our expenses are our expenses, and people's assessments don't change how much money it costs to keep the lights on in the town.
Right.
So there was quite a variation in people's taxes, if there were substantial improvements that were picked up during the reappraisal. But spending is linear. Reassessments went up, but the overall tax collected is relatively stable.
Right, and to add to that, somebody a while back on Front Porch Forum mentioned that essentially if your taxes go up, then you were probably, your property was probably undervalued by the taxes, and if your taxes went down, it was probably overvalued. Because as David has said, the money to be raised is essentially, is close to being flat. So if you suddenly see a bump in your tax bill, as I did, I saw,
Appraisal.
my appraisal went up. And I wasn't surprised by that happening, but that just means I was
In the
paying
long
less.
run, it's a
It
good
mean
thing
I
for
was
you,
paying
but
less than my
for
share in a
us, yeah.
sense.
Yeah.
And that's just the municipal taxes, the education taxes.
and
That's
that
somebody
did,
else.
that was implemented last year as well. So this increase is actually 6.1%. So I'm not sure where you saw that number, but calculating that it's
I've got too many
6.1.
pages. I can't find it, but I know I saw it. so,
Yeah, so that's what the increase is here. And this is all based on the voter approved budget, appropriations and conservation fund.
Karen?
I just wanted to confirm, it was going to be, you are correct. I did have the calculation of the 6.1% increase in Richmond taxes. Local taxes went up by 6%. Correct.
And
Mhm.
we always want to try to keep the tax increase minimal. Unfortunately, the insurance companies
Don't.
That's
Don't.
one of them, right? And we're still.
Yeah,
kind of-
if we
we're still
were,
carrying FEMA as far as that goes.
well, that's also true. When we get reimbursed by FEMA for the $500,000 we spent recovering from last year,
That would help.
that's $500,000 we could have applied to reducing taxes.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we can't because it was spent.
And if we have that, well, I don't know if we'll know that number by FY26 budget timeframe, but we might have a better understanding that we have some large projects right now moving through FEMA. They all, even though we're on the simplified process, it continues to be involved. But hopefully we're getting close on a couple of larger road projects.
Right.
Josh, a question. If we approve this or disapprove it, but if we approve this, we can still alter these numbers downward?
Well, this is all based on the voter approved budget and the grand list, so it kind of is what it
Probably
is.
going to be, yeah.
Yes.
So there's no.
I mean, because
manipulation.
in that budget, we included use of reserve funds, we included use of unassigned funds, so
Mhm.
that's all been added into that.
Right. And the thing we have to watch out for when that FEMA money does come through is not regarded as sofa cushion money.
Oh, it's
It's
got to replenish.
it's got to replenish funds where we've depleted them, and otherwise it should be used to reduce taxes.
Right, yes.
Karen?
This brings up the concept of the unassigned funds. And because you haven't had a full police force for FY 24, you will have unassigned funds that will exceed your amount that you've capped it at. I don't know if you ended up at 18% there. So you'll have unassigned funds probably as high as 35% again, just like last year. So the difference between their 35% and 18%, you should have a tax rate adjustment maybe halfway through the year. Rather than roll that into the next year, because you've made a policy that said that that's what you would do with it, unless you spend it somewhere else, which I really think that's going to have to be identified to the taxpayer. Thank you.
Thank you, Kara. Any other comments? Okay, I guess we're ready for a motion.
I'd make it. I think that way,
Sorry, we got to scroll all the way down. It did not conveniently scroll for me.
Line 176.
Oh, item J.
Mr. Chairman, I move to set the fiscal year 25 municipal tax rate at 0.4969.
This is Lisa, I'll second.
Thank you. Motion made by Jay, seconded by Lisa Miller. This is setting of the municipal tax rate for the fiscal year 25. Absent any further discussion.
Can I ask one question?
Sure.
We close this topic. The fiscal year end was June 30th. One would draft financials, and I don't mean audited financials. When would you see your first draft of financials that would go to the auditors? Are you within 30 days of providing those kinds of numbers? How long does that take the town to close?
Close the books.
Probably, I'd say probably, I have to check, probably it usually takes at least a month to go through those numbers.
30 days.
I'd say, maybe more, it depends on how many things you have to close out and go back for, but we'll help them as soon as we can.
That would be possible within the next 4 to 6 weeks.
Maybe, I'm not gonna guarantee that.
Going on my memory from years past, I think we saw that end of July, beginning of August, but I might be wrong.
Probably, but I'd say more so towards August.
Yeah. But that's a good question.
End of July, beginning of August is. 4 to 6
My
weeks.
guess, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. I'll remind you at one of your next select board meetings, but I'd love to see those numbers.
As would we.
Okay, are we ready for a vote? Looks like we are. Please identify yourself and signify your vote.
Lisa, aye.
J.I.
Adam, I.
David, I. Thank you, Josh.
Yes.
Okay, so now we're up to B, follow up on meeting regarding pedestrian, bicycle, and vehicular traffic in the village. So before I turn that over to Josh, I just want to say again, I want to express my thanks for people bringing their thoughts and ideas to this room at that meeting. And my impression was we had a pretty thoughtful, respectful conversation, and a lot of good ideas were discussed. And I hope that this will be the genesis of a plan moving forward to improve pedestrian, bicycle, and vehicular traffic on the Bridge Street corridor.
David, I'm glad you put it that way. There were a lot of people had a lot of opinions and passionate feelings for them, and everybody kind of held it in and kept it factual and clear, so.
I said it that night, and I'll say it again. One of the things I really like about this town is it was clear that there were strong opinions and strong emotions, but things were discussed in a thoughtful manner, and opinions were respected and thoughts were considered. And I wish we could carry that over and we could see
We'll
that
apply the next time. I don't know.
on the
Yeah.
state and federal level,
I know
but
people hate that.
I'll take what we've got on the local
Exactly.
level
I was-
happily.
I was really happy.
So, Mr. Chairman, as I'm looking at the suggestions, and again, I echo what people said about the civility. One of the things that was mentioned by several people is which things are quick wins, which things will require more detail. So for example, when we're talking about the guided crosswalk in front of, between the Hatchet and the Big Spruce, many people agreed that that was a problem because you cannot see people waiting because of trucks. I don't know if the idea of changing the traffic ordinance so that big trucks are asked to park on Depot Street and not on Bridge Street. Whether, I mean, that's something that can be done quickly, or do we want to take a much more deliberate pace on that? We also discussed the idea of a push out where the sidewalk would be brought out right there at the crosswalk so that people are standing a little bit more in view. That obviously requires a little bit more work because you don't just start building new sidewalks. Lighting is one of the things that I am in particular bothered by because I'm a big scary guy, but I don't like to tell citizens who leave a select board meeting at 10:30 in October, cope. And so I don't know how fast of I would imagine that again has to go through planning, but I would love to see more light on the corners and places we've identified it in downtown and also out here. So that would be my next wish, is to say, how can we prioritize these? Which ones can be done in the near to midterm future? Which ones are a little longer term? But I would hope lighting can be toward the top.
Yeah, I'm going to ask you this question. That was addressed in the upgrade to the town center campus. So a
That
lot
was.
of that work was already done, correct?
That's a good point. And that was required by the state as part of something else that we were doing. But yes, the lighting proposals for out here, I think though also included building of traffic islands where there are not currently any. I don't know if that's something we have to have or whether the lights can be had without that.
And as far as Bridge Street, it's kind of tricky. We buy light from Green Mountain Power.
Right.
We don't buy the electricity for the streetlights. We buy the light.
We buy the lumens, yeah.
So we could probably work with Green Mountain Power to address lighting on Bridge Street. And then,
And add more poles.
Yeah. I think one of the places we identified was there by the market.
yeah,
Um,
and
Yeah,
there is a
that's
pole
weakness,
there.
yeah.
mhm.
Now, to Penny Rand's comment, I mean, we got too much light already. She lives there and sees it. all
Well,
the
that's
time.
why we need to make sure that the
Yeah.
lighting that we get is.
She doesn't
is-
need to have her yard lit.
Yeah, I'm sure I'm speaking to the choir for a lot of people here, but the International Dark Sky Association recommends various types of lights that will move their light down, not glare laterally or glare up. One thing that I was thinking might not be a bad idea, and I'm not a lighting engineer, for the parking lot here is the bollard lighting
Mhm.
that just has
Yeah.
light, yeah,
Puts it right where you need it.
right.
Not like a bird's eye. There's also what they call sharp cutoff luminaires
Mhm.
that give you a kind of a beam.
Right.
Sorry, I can't hear you, Lisa. I'm sorry. I
Eric
can't
could not
what
hear
you're
you.
saying.
Oh,
I mean, the microphone isn't, it didn't project this way.
oh, okay, I was looking at Jay. Well, what I said was just kind of incidental, but there are these things called sharp cutoff luminaires that do direct the light mostly where you want it. I mean, moisture in the air is going to diffuse it to everywhere, but if we start out with something that's aimed, it generally is better than just having a bare light bulb sort of concept.
Thank you for repeating.
Mary?
Hi there, Mary Hool. Once upon a time, we had the first Veterans Parade in the state of Vermont. Gary was there. His father was one of the honored guests. And prior to that, we had a big, fat, expensive lighting survey done. Remember Catherine Kilpeck's comments about the lighting survey? We were going to have a flag outside the round church, but we were not going to have the flag unless the flag was lit. This fancy pants lighting survey indicated that all the lights in the town of Richmond were going to cast down. So that lighting study is somewhere in the town archives. Again, very expensive. Got to be almost 20 years ago, 15 years ago.
Older than that.
But that's still valid.
Mhm.
And I think they talked about the dark sky stuff and all that other fun stuff, but I can guarantee you what is going to get lighting happening a hell of a lot faster is if someone gets assaulted out here and we are all aware that this is an issue. And it's not going to be at the time when the building is reconstructed to whatever standard. Someone gets assaulted out here because you need to be able to describe the person that assaulted you. I can't because the lighting was only knee high. No, you have to, and the study indicated that the lights have to be cast down. There are some lights, I think, on Church Street that were accommodating to the same study. But having someone assaulted and filing suit against the town because someone was injured is going to move that light a heck of a lot faster. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary.
Hmm.
Kara?
as far as the town center committee, because I am a member of the town center committee, the building committees here. I think it's okay for me to take back to the committee the issue of the lighting in the parking lot and let them know that it's a priority coming from the select board, if that's what the majority of the select board would like to have us address. I know Adam's the chair and he's on the call up there on the video right now. But I think it's reasonable to go back to that committee and have us look at what's already been designed and if those designs would come into play, or if it was the whole redoing of the whole parking lot that was part of it, then I'm not for that. I think it's realistic for us to look at. You have a light in the parking lot right now that's off, completely off. So your lighting problem is the existing lighting isn't working, and I don't know why it's not working, whether it needs new bulbs or it's totally doesn't work, period. So there's some ways to address some of your lighting issues based on maintenance. So if you all support me taking it back as the items there, we'll add it to an agenda and have it be discussed.
It's, yeah, I'm sure it's part of what we've already paid for as far as the illumination study and so forth. So.
Right.
You have anything to add?
I think prioritization is a great idea, trying to figure out what we want to do, what's going to take longer. Sort of leads me honestly to the next agenda item is some of this, I think it'd be great to go to a transportation committee to say, what can we implement quickly? What takes more study? What's a hard no? What's an easy yes? That's the next agenda item though.
I support what Jay alluded to, a bigger bang for the buck, putting up signs, painting crosswalks.
Yeah,
Things that don't have to be engineered and studied and built in stages. Lighting is a good one.
Right. I know Pete had said he's going to be using paint that will be much more durable, wear off less frequently, maybe only need to be applied every 2 years. I'm sure he has a schedule for repainting the crosswalks. I just don't know what that schedule is.
He usually does it every spring as soon as the weather allows.
But there are people who are saying right now it's severely lacking, or at least that's what we heard.
I mean, I think he just repainted everything in the last month or so.
Okay.
If there's a spot that's insufficient, let me know and I'll
Okay.
pass it along to Pete, but I think he got everything.
Good.
He
Okay.
usually does.
It's one of those things you don't notice unless you're looking for it or
Yeah.
across there frequently.
I think that, yeah, the paint he bought, I think it's supposed to last 2 years. We'll see how it does going through a winter with plows.
One thing that Bard had alluded to several times was stop bars. Those are not. And so if we wanted to go that way, that would be, we need to get the stencils, I would imagine, but otherwise it's just, some man hours and some paint.
Yeah. I think that would fall under your discretion to say, hey, let's do stop bars.
Probably just stop.
I've heard a lot of people talk about stop bars. I mean, they're just so simple. And when you don't have them, you don't notice you don't have them, but people are everywhere.
Right. And people don't know, do I stop here? Do I stop here? Next thing they're just like, oh, the hell, but I'll just
And there are a
keep
couple
going.
intersections where it really doesn't matter where you stop or don't stop.
I inherited my sister's car, which was a bare bones base model Subaru, and its claim to fame was the cheapest car you could buy until the Hyundai came out. I stopped at a freshly painted stop bar one July day just as it started to rain, and I waited for the traffic to clear. And then it was my turn to go, so I let off the clutch and the wheels just went and the car was stuck
To the road.
Kara.
I know you guys are just talking about the area of the village that you have identified, but could you please add the stop bars to Cochrane
Yeah.
Road and Thompson Road as priorities, since those are rolling stops? And we also talked about some way of indicating that the bicyclists should stop there too. And I don't know if there's a sign or a symbol that has to be put on the stop sign, or a smaller little stop sign that says bicycle stop here too, because that's the number one group of people that in more than one occasion have blown through those stop signs and come right across onto Huntington Road, or have come right across and gone on to,
Awkward.
yeah,
Mm.
Cochrane. So I don't know what that is, how you do that, but I'd like to stop painted on the roads in both places, and an indication for bicyclists to stop too, please.
Yeah, I don't know what you can do for bicyclists. And my understanding is they're supposed to follow the rules of the road like a vehicle.
If they're on the
Um,
road, they're.
Frequently, they follow it. I've seen when it's convenient and
Mhm.
beneficial to them, and not when it's
You get the
not.
best of both
Well,
worlds.
on the
They're trying
Burlington
to.
bike path- on the Burlington bike path, they have a different symbol for bicyclists
Right,
that
but
stops,
that's-
a little different sign.
Bike path versus a road. So well, I'll ask Pete and see if he has anything specific. But I mean, a bike path is different than a road that vehicles go on, just because bike paths is bikes and pad versus vehicles.
Cochrane Road is a bike path. I think we
Right,
should
okay.
have a sign, especially at Cochrane Road, the end of Cochrane Road, to have bicyclers stop.
Mary?
Yeah, there's a Mary Hole, there's a municipal handbook that cites the specific signs and signage and what you can put on the road and the symbols and stencils
Yeah.
and all that. So I'm sure Pete has a copy of
Oh,
it. And alternately, I would love to be on the clock a couple hours a day to yell at people for going through that stop sign. I am available.
Mhm.
I am available.
Anytime you want to yell at people for running a stop sign?
Yes, but I'm gonna be on the clock for this.
And Mr. Chairman, one other thing that was discussed as possibly a quick win. Is it correct that we have the hardware for an illuminated crosswalk with the flashing signs? Do we already, didn't?
Didn't we purchase one that we haven't put in yet?
Yes.
I believe we purchased one like a week ago, so
Oh,
it's
okay.
not here, it's coming.
Okay, I had the vague idea that we had one in storage somewhere, but
I know we
okay.
budgeted. for
Yeah,
one.
the discussion was to put it at the crosswalk by Jelena Court on Bridge Street. But if the board would like to direct that to go somewhere else, we certainly could, or buy a second one and put in too. We
Well,
certainly
again,
could.
I'm not a traffic engineer, but since I'm very worried about that intersection, having one there, I think will call attention. People will likely go more slowly there, period.
Which intersection is that?
The Jelena Court
Okay.
Market
Yeah.
one. I still would like to, the idea of doing more visible separators between the pseudo sidewalk there and the road, especially ones that could be seen in the winter. Some people were saying we need to have beautiful separators. I'm like, I'm all over that, provided we legally can put them there. I don't, and then I think you said during the meeting something about some of the land is public, some of the land is Dan Noyes. I don't know where the dividing line is, but that would be another thing that if I don't know if it needs to go through planning or whether we're just out there putting planters in, but I'm sure that there's some things in the MUTCD about
Right.
you cannot have a separator that will total a car if you run into it. So
Right.
so
Well-
there are a number of things that could potentially be quick wins, provided we dot our i's legally and cross our t's.
I think where the separators would go is well within the town right away, from my understanding of where that line is up there. And I'll ask Pete for suggestions on what he thinks we could put there. Of course, following code.
Right.
What about those things you suggested, Jay?
The
That a truck could still.
right, yeah, truck hit that. The nice thing about those is I don't think they're too tacky. Some people think they do, but they won't damage a vehicle that hits them, but they're going to be visible
Mhm.
day or night in all kinds of weather.
The orange ones look nice, but the Dayglow green ones are tacky.
But I mean, that's the thing is those would probably cost, I forget it,
They're cheap.
they're cheap and they're replaceable. And somebody walking in 3 inches of slush in January who can't see the sidewalk, they're still going to be protected by that because people will know on this side, I'm not supposed to go.
Mr. Chairman.
Well, I also wonder though, we have to talk with Pete about road maintenance and,
Yeah, they don't
The
plow
way
so
they're-
well.
well, because I think he does push snow off that area, so he might need to have a pathway that's unobstructed, but I can ask Pete about the geometry that he needs.
Right.
Before we go and piecemeal engineer something, I think we should talk to our transportation committee, who has already studied these, has a lot of documentation of what's best, what's maybe, what the considerations were and so forth. I know a couple of them are here.
Mhm.
They are the experts, not us.
Yeah.
And,
Right. Yeah, I don't want to do anything half-assed, if you pardon the expression, but I do think that there's some things that
we may be.
we could practically do
Maybe
tomorrow.
do some things, right, a quick, list of quick and slow and in between, sure. But I'd really feel more comfortable drawing on their wisdom and
Right.
their efforts before we do any of those.
And then the idea of a big crane-like thing that would grab cars and.
No, the magnetic thing, the car pickup.
Right. I think that we should put off for a year or two.
Or under the pavement, you just hold the car right there till Anthony can come over and give him a ticket.
Mary, could you be in charge of that?
Sure,
Sitting with her.
Switch on and on.
I'll use my ski poles for that.
That's good. Okay, thank you.
Are we ready to move on?
Well, how does this play out, since this is something you've now discussed for 2 back-to-back meetings?
Mhm.
What's the next steps with this? Is any of the ideas you kicked around only going back to the transportation committee, or is the select board going to implement by Josh talking to Pete, and implement some of the things that you just addressed.
Yeah, I mean, I think the short answer to your good question is there are three principals at play: Pete, the Transportation Committee, and Josh.
I know they're on the next agenda item, so.
Bring them up, it's time.
I will just say, we're supposed to be a committee of 5 and we are now a committee of 2, so we can't create a quorum. So as of this point, having us do things is kind of immaterial.
You can make
Yeah.
recommendations,
Yeah,
strictly recommendations,
Well, they can only do so informally because they can't even legally meet right now.
correct?
So we may have to move ahead on some of these until there at such time as there is a transportation committee.
Means,
But Pete definitely needs to be involved because all of these, I mean, painting stop bars is just like, Pete, you have to paint.
yeah, I think paint, the delineators, that's
delineate.
easy stuff.
Flexible delineators.
Easy stuff we can move forward with, and if we determine we want to change that in some future year, we can change it, bump outs a little more.
That's a little
more
more
thoughtful.
Mhm.
But yeah, I think those couple things we can probably make happen pretty quickly.
Can you do maybe delineators at the end of the parking spaces? So that, and maybe paint that crosswalk up there so that people walk out to the delineators? So they can be seen. I don't know. I'm just trying to think of some way.
Where are we talking about on Bridge?
Right on Bridge Street where you wanna have that
Crosswalk where you
bump out.
can't see
Oh.
the.
But rather than have the
crosswalk.
bump out for right now, can you at least put a delineator, 2 delineators,
Oh,
one on
right.
each side of the walk?
Well, moreover, one suggestion that I liked quite a lot was putting a delineator smack in the middle of the street, just like they have at the airport.
Which I think someone said we used to have it, and it just got trashed pretty quickly, but we could try again.
And then the part about, I like Jay's idea, the part about the no large trucks with bike racks hanging way out. In those, at least the minimum of those 2 parking spaces on both sides of that crosswalk.
Yeah.
I don't know.
That could be as easy as a sign, compact car parking only.
Right.
of
And it's
those
not
2
like the Depot
spots.
Street lot is not right there.
Yeah.
I know you can't guarantee there'll be available spaces, but we have a thing that a lot of us have commented on, that people say there's no parking because they're not willing to park in the town center and walk a block. And the same thing is kind of true. I don't want to park in Depot Street. I have to walk around the corner to get my latte. Yeah, but it really impacts pedestrian safety.
So just even those 2 spots, so let's just say those 2 spots, you put some level of restriction on. We know we don't have enforcement. We know it's gonna be honor code for people to not park there, or the businesses can educate their customers. But
Yeah.
how do you move forward just minimum of those 2 spots to protect the people in that crosswalk a little bit more?
Yeah.
Who does that go to? Does it go to the parking ordinance? Or is it something that you guys can move forward with? How does that work for the select board? And does it go to the parking advisory committee? Because last I knew they weren't doing village stuff, but maybe they are now.
Yeah, I don't think the parking advisory committee wants to take on much more than recreation parking. My first thought is parking would probably have to go to the ordinance to have it enforceable. I know time limits and those types of things have to. I've never looked at type of cars. But we could also put up, that takes like a good couple month process to change the ordinance. But we could also just put signs up and see what happens.
Well, we can,
You just wouldn't be enforcing.
Yeah, I mean, wouldn't it be?
I have one, maybe a dumb question, but do we have any municipal parking signs in the town?
Mhm.
Okay, because I had a friend who didn't even know that this town center parking lot exists. They don't live in Richmond, but
Well,
They've-
there's, yeah.
they're here to bike for years and.
Public parking sign. right?
Okay. See, I knew it was a dumb question, but.
And Depot Street, just look, it says municipal parking too.
Okay.
So I make that recommendation that you have Pete buy 2 compact car signs and put them up. Test it, see if
Right.
people honor it or not.
Maybe.
that should go on the list of things that we have to prioritize.
Josh wrote it down.
And somebody
the list.
can somebody please, when you decide to put those signs up, please go to those businesses right on that strip and explain why you're doing that. It's about safety, the pedestrian safety for the crosswalk.
Yeah.
I mean, if I was a business owner there, I'd really appreciate you letting me know why
Yeah.
the change.
Yeah, they can be part of the solution.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Anything else? Okay,
Thank you.
discussion of letter from the Transportation Committee.
We've got Keith and John here.
Oh, yeah, talk.
Wrote the letter, so-
Don't be shy, come here. And you guys can still be not a committee, but make comments on the other stuff that they were talking about before.
Yeah.
Please participate.
They were great ideas.
Welcome.
Hello. Can we talk first?
Sure.
Yes, I mean, I can speak for myself, and John and I share some opinions, and can't speak for our former members. But I think the whole point of the letter was wanting to move forward in a productive way that serves the needs of the town. One of those ways is the continuation of the Transportation Committee, recruitment of new members, potentially more involvement with the select board, because maybe that was one of our failures, was poor communication, or just not. There's just so much happens in a small town that needs to get taken care of, that some things can just get forgotten about. And so I know I'm personally, I am invested and willing to invest much more time into the transportation infrastructure for this town, and that's for drivers, for cyclists, for pedestrians, because most of us on this call, in this room, in this town are all three at some point. So yeah, that's was my purpose in the letter, wanting to move forward, and if so, how? Because we'll need some more members.
Yeah, that's ultimately what it comes down to is.
I can say I find you guys indispensable.
Yeah.
I mean, I actually can't think of any committee that's dispensable. So we wouldn't have them, I guess. But what you guys have done, it took me a while to wade through some of the documents that you've produced and the studies and so forth. And I can see, as we kind of knee-jerk react and, micro design something here at a meeting, that must be pretty frustrating to you.
Yeah.
And because it's not done as an integrated whole, and we could be wasting effort. We could be wasting our time where we should be spending time on something bigger, like engaging, you guys, engaging people to help you guys out.
Right.
Find some committee members. So I apologize for that. It's easy to do. People have questions. We try to seek answers, and it's real easy to just go back and forth, and we think we've got it solved. And that's really just step one. The rest is what you guys do to get to step L or Z or whatever number of steps it would be in the actual solution. So, we don't do anyone a service by cutting that process in half or cutting it off arbitrarily. So,
Right. I know that one of the things that upset some of the former members was that the sidewalk project had been in the works for literally years.
Mhm.
We had discussed it many, many times in public forum. There had been many discussions about it. And then when we're almost ready to start, proceeding, suddenly 400 people or whatever the number was got very, very upset. We're like, okay. And
I got upset with a skewed story.
that's true. And then as we saw at the special meeting last week, suddenly all these people who had a compelling reason why we should have had sidewalks spoke up.
Yeah.
And I know that as a member of a committee, if I work for years on something and then it gets thrown out in one, it's like, why should I bother?
Yeah.
And that's something that I don't know I have an answer for.
Yeah.
Well, if I could back up a little bit and say, back when I was in the select board, there were people demanding improvements to sidewalks, to transportation issues and things like that. Select board at the time did a Bridge Street study, which then sat for a few years, which sort of prompted a few of us to say, like, maybe there's a space somewhere between the select board and the planning commission, because neither your body or the planning commission had the bandwidth to go through the public meetings, the work with the consultants, because you've got day-to-day stuff to deal with. And there was this nice niche there where the transportation committee could do some of that work. But we started by getting authorization from the select board. We went through the town plan. We came back to the select board and said, here are our priorities. We asked the select board for its priorities. We melded those together. We came back again. We told you what was going on, and then regularly throughout the processes, whether it was Cochrane Road work, whether it was Route 2 or Bridge Street and others, we would come back and report. So I think there was, and then before started with the engineering for Bridge Street, we brought it back to the select board. So yeah, back to this, changing it on a dime, as opposed to maybe sending it back to us. I think the biggest problem now, as I see it, is not just, are there people in town willing to invest those years in developing a project, and having it, gutted at the last minute, but who's going to pay for it? Both the projects would have leveraged a lot of state, federal dollars, and I don't know, I've not re-engaged with the RPC or VTrans to ask, because it didn't seem like my spot to do that, but would they trust us on the next grant proposal? And who's going to want to be on a committee that doesn't necessarily have that, doesn't know if its efforts are going to go anywhere. So, I think it's a tall order for whoever will be on that committee. I think ideally, if the select board wants wants to be closer to it, maybe someone from the select board could be on it, or someone's, but it's not like you guys have extra time in your week. So, it's gonna have to be thought out fairly clearly and made pretty concrete to the working plan for this committee if it stays together.
Would it be appropriate or even doable to ask Pete to join?
We could see if he could join. He is not a resident, so I don't know. Maybe as an advisory, non-voting member, if he's got the time to join in, potentially. I can ask him. I know his plate's pretty full too. And I know he goes to a lot of meetings when requested. He's been to several parking committee meetings. I think he's been to a few of yours when you did them for input.
Yeah, and we would just walk down the street and check with him too.
Yeah, and I know that, he's usually more than happy. I don't know if he can make a standing meeting twice a month, but I know he's usually very open for bouncing ideas off of.
Just a thought.
Yeah, no, we could, if you want to try, we could put a special notice in Front Porch Forum and try to look around and see if there's anybody else that would want to join. There's a lot of people in town, and maybe they would.
Yeah, I think we need to put out a casting call essentially, but we also need to put a little bit with that as far as what we're looking for in a person.
Yeah.
They don't have to be experts.
Can I intervene for a second? Sorry, Amy Gifford on Zoom. I don't know how to raise my hand. I've been trying to do it in the Zoom thing and I haven't figured it out. Is it okay if I ask a question?
Go ahead.
Okay, so I would like to go on record saying that this is not how Richmond Community Kitchen wished for the sidewalk process to go. And I will accept responsibility for not being part of tracking what the transportation committee was doing. I have been, and it's maybe it's an excuse, but I've been raising a family, building a business. I've been dedicating my energy to other places, and I apologize for not knowing. Why was the business owner and the building owner left out of that outreach? That shouldn't have happened. And so this should be a cautionary tale for the future when projects come up, that should be part of the process, because as soon as we joined the process, we tried to work with Keith to figure out a solution for how the sidewalk could work with our parking so that we can continue to have a successful business in town, and we were shut down. So I apologize that this happened and it went the way it went, but it could have gone differently if a few other steps had been taken. So I want to understand why that step wasn't taken directly, why a phone call wasn't made, or why an email wasn't sent. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I think Amy has a good point.
Yeah, David, can I speak to that?
Yeah.
You know, I think the problem is well, I'm not unbiased myself either, but the Transportation Committee has a technical job to do. You're given a mandate by the select board and your charter and you go do it. The select board has the political, carries the political football. And that's kind of what that is. When something that they have designed and it does it well
Sorry, just
on
quick
paper.
clar- we don't design.
Well, okay. You've got consultants, but you have plans. I don't know, maybe they're just mental, but you write out a good story and wherever it goes, it's gone far enough to be something people can understand. And an expert can take it and critique it and say, there's a weakness here, there's a strength here and all that. So what you guys are doing it has to be done by somebody. So, you know, you guys have done, but we're the political body who takes all the arrows and so forth. But somewhere in there, that's necessary too. If you come up with something that's a systemic success, but a political failure, you know, it's not on you.
Yeah.
It should have been us or somebody to say, hang on, we've got to find a middle road here or something. And we didn't do that. So
I'll say that when we,
Mhm.
at several points during, say, the Bridge Street project, as well as other projects we've done, we did, you know, there were public meetings held. We did do outreach to businesses. I believe in that part, it was, some of that may have been caught because of transition between the previous town planner and the current town planner, whereas Ravi was doing some of the outreach to Bridge Street businesses. There may have been some things. I know I was calling some Bridge Street businesses and saying, please come to the meeting. I did not back 2 years ago. I don't think I contacted you, Amy, but I thought others were doing that. I did contact Amy, you know, more recently, several months ago, to let them know about what I understood to be original sketches or designs, but not anything close to final designs.
Mhm.
But part of our committee's role was to do, or is to do outreach.
Okay.
And get public opinion and public feedback and to reality test some things.
Yeah, and you still need the select board behind you, and I don't know if we really were enough or informed enough.
I'd like to address a couple of things, Carol Bounty. Back when John Cart was on the select board, sidewalks were an issue. Sidewalks have been an issue. It was about maintenance of sidewalks, not adding more sidewalks, but maintaining what we have. So Pete made a maintenance plan for that and a capital plan that went into effect. Just like the side of Bridge Street that got rebuilt. Thank you, great job. So I wanted to say that, yes, there was a public outcry for maintaining the sidewalks we have, including working on the West Main Street sidewalk near the Catholic Church that needs to be rebuilt. That's on the list. So yes, I agree with John on that. I don't think the public outcry was to create a lot more new sidewalks, that we weren't even maintaining the existing sidewalks that we had. That's one piece I wanted to address. The other piece is Lisa keeps saying that the Transportation Committee, and I'm glad that they said that they're not technical. They are not technical. The CCRPC did work for them. They've hired engineers to do work for them. My fear is that we continue to do scoping studies that we then say this scoping study was done for us, so we have to use it. We have to use it. We have to do something with it. And I do take a little bit of offense to the knee-jerk reaction comment that was made, that you guys made a knee-jerk reaction to the public that have come forward to say we don't want the sidewalk, when 2 years ago at a town meeting, you've heard from citizens who were concerned about it, one being a business owner, Denise Barnard, who spoke up, and others that spoke up who were concerned about it, as well as the cemetery committee, who always never wanted it. So to say it was now a surprise that people didn't want it, it sounds like the business owners on the side of the street that were going to be impacted the most were not contacted. And that was what the problem was, is you talk to Bridge Street business owners, but they were all on the other side where the sidewalk already exists, or they were like Blue Big Spruce, which already has a sidewalk. So if you've met with the bank and you've met with NOFA and you've met with
Community Kitchen.
Richmond Community Kitchen, then those are the business owners, because there's no other business owners between here and Big Spruce. So if they're all saying we were never contacted, then whoever dropped the ball, and it's not a select board job to take over a committee's reach out and talking to property owners. The committees who are impacting properties should be responsible for communicating directly with them and not through posting on Front Porch Forum, but actual contact with them. We're too small a town to not be able to have somebody stop in and say, hey, we're working on this project. I'd love to show you some plans, or could you come to one of our meetings and have some input? I mean, there's major opportunity all across the board, but what's happened historically with some committees is we do a scoping study and then that becomes their direction because the select board has said, hey, we did this study, go see how we can implement it. Not asking the rest of the town if we wanted it, because we're going to get to another scoping study for a discussion coming down the pike here tonight. And my point is, we wanted some of the things from the scoping study that improved the sidewalk we had, that improved the lighting that we had, that improved the signage and the paint that we've had. We don't necessarily have to do a whole nother sidewalk on the other side of the road because the scoping study had that. And that's where it feels like the community wasn't listened to. And so it was forced to do a petition to save businesses, handicap parking spaces, and to be heard. But be clear, they spoke to the select board 2 years ago at a town meeting. It's on video.
Thank you, Kara. Virginia?
Yeah, Virginia Clark. So I think one of the things that is upsetting to committees is to have the select board make these decisions in a hasty way. You know, it seems like this would have been an opportunity to, just with hindsight, to say, well, let's think about this. You know, let's talk to the committee. Let's work with the committee. Let's work with to find out what it is that people are upset about. We know what Amy was upset about. But if we could have taken a little more time, maybe the committee would have felt like it wasn't just totally being ignored. And, you know, I think this has happened with other committees, is that the select board feels under pressure to make a decision based on the voices that they're hearing right then, whereas it might have been better to take a little more time with that decision, to look at what it's going to cost us to not accept that grant, in fact, which could be real money, what it will cost us in terms of goodwill in the planning agencies about doing future studies. You know, maybe look a little more at the ramifications of what it is. Look at the decisions that you've made before, look at the people you've heard from before, try to weigh that with the people who are speaking up now. Maybe convene a group of people to understand what this problem is rather than just reacting. That seems like it would be helpful.
Thank you, Virginia.
And I think what would have helped us in this process is if there had been a clear directive on process, because we did try to propose alternative plans and Keith was acting as the intermediary, and it felt like we couldn't really get a clear read on whether information was being shared with the transportation committee, whether the transportation committee was open to working with it was very a lot behind the scenes, and maybe that's not a place that, again, I'm just the business owner, I'm not the building owner, so I do know that the building owner feels similarly, but that someone should have been able to intervene in that process and understand how to participate once it got to that stage. And so it might be helpful to ease those relationships if there can be a clearly defined process of communication between the select board, the transportation committee, the town planner, and people who have something to say about it. And that was not clear to us, and it led to feeling like we were backed into a corner, and that was really unfortunate.
You know, it occurs to me that written testimony at some point would probably be a lot better than verbal testimony. We got a lot of testimony from a lot of people, probably different testimony at different times from the same people. I don't know, but that's one thing we don't know. Written testimony I know if I have to give some kind of a written response to a question, I'll think it over. And be careful what I put in there. It's a lot easier for me to open my mouth, and most people I think are the same way. So maybe that's one of the things we should do. It might appear to slow the process down. It might not be a bad thing either, but we'll at least have the same answer tomorrow that we have today from the same person. And we should be treated the same way. We make decisions and so forth. We put them in writing, we go out with them. If they're absolutely wrong, then we need to change them. But otherwise, they stand and people can react to them without them morphing and not made out of rubber, essentially.
Yeah.
So,
Mr. Chairman, one of the things I don't want to do is say, yes, let's contact all the property owners who live along an area we're thinking about doing something to. And so it's a brilliant new idea, because it's not. But this is going to sound like a stupid suggestion, but if we have a list of, who owns what property along a certain stretch of road, we could, and we don't want the note to get overlooked. You get your mail, you're like, toss, toss, toss. There is such a thing as a certified letter, and it costs $4 to send one. And one of the approaches we could have tried would have been to say, let's send a certified letter to everybody who lives along Bridge Street, and also to the businesses that operate there, because as Amy has said, she does not own the building. But to make absolutely damn surely, pardon the expression, that everybody knows, instead of just sending a letter or posting something in Front Porch Forum and hoping people see it. Because there are certain things you just absolutely do not want to have overlooked, and certain things like the sidewalk project, we might have been able to be spared a lot of pain had we just, spent $4 times what, 20 or so piece of parcels. $80 would have been well spent there.
good point. Yeah. I mean, that makes it very official and something people don't.
Yeah, it's very hard to overlook when you have to
Yeah.
like sign for the letter. It's like, okay, I need to
Yeah.
read this.
It's serious.
But like I said, it sounds very glib, so simple. Why don't we just do this? But we may find that, no matter what approach we take, there will always be somehow a way for it to fall through the cracks. Other than going in person to people and saying, I need to verify you have heard about this. And even then you're going to miss people who are on vacation. But we need to, we probably should have done more.
Well, I think the demise of, the way it ended up, its demise, I suppose, but does need to be investigated and fixed. We need to do something different. That's clear. What it is, I think we're still figuring out, but I think, you brought up some good points. Everybody has, and it's, that tells me that people think there's still a problem.
Yeah,
So,
oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Kara?
I think you had multiple select board hearings on the matter once
did.
you heard that there was a problem and an issue. So you didn't make it in one night's decision. You were in the process of researching, and this is me defending the select board, so please make sure you're opening your ears and listening. Is that you were researching how to see what was in the cemetery bank. And you had UVM talking about it. You had, I don't know, what was the technology that they
Ground penetrating radar.
Thank you. You had that, you had those folks come and speak about it. You were in an investigation stage. And after that investigation was complete, and we all heard that they could not confirm for sure, that you decided that you did not want to disrupt the bank because that's where people who of no means were buried were on the outer edges of the cemetery. So you were going to potentially disrupt some graves. And I respect that you heard that and you made your decision based on that. So this is me defending you, that you had the last piece of information that you were waiting for. It wasn't just the petition that was circulating that you were aware of. It was that piece of information that made you decide that you didn't want to disrupt the bank at the cemetery.
Thank you, Karen.
That's the way I recall it, and Josh is making
Yeah.
a face over there, so it must be I'm recalling it
No,
wrong.
You know,
sorry.
It's things I sat through.
I don't mean to make a face, I'm sorry, but you're right, I was, because the way I recall it was on that agenda, we had an agenda item to remind about the June 10th, I think it was, meeting to look at engineering plans and discuss the sidewalk project in more detail. And we had a special meeting that was going to be set up for a couple of hours to hear feedback on the sidewalk, the entire length of it, from the park up to the big spruce and the piece across the street with the market. We would have the engineer here and the experts to go over questions and answers. And we actually were trying to look at other options for the community kitchen. We were, the engineer had certain parameters that she had to work within and codes she had to meet, and was going to hopefully look at some options with the board. But, and also on that, you're right, was the,
Two
so,
hearings.
but no, but also on that agenda was the looking at the ground penetrating radar, and do we want to move forward with that? So we had experts lined up for that night to talk about, the process that, UVM had proposed and what ground penetrating radar would add to that or not add to that based on what they could do. The petition, though, came in during public comment. It took about an hour of discussion, and during that time, that's when the board said, nope, we're not gonna even have the June 10th meeting. We're gonna stop everything right now, full stop. So I think that part of why those voices that Bard was asking, why weren't you here during, when we talked about this, was maybe they were waiting for the June 10th meeting, which had been discussed prior, and said, we're gonna do this on June 10th. But then when the petition came in, it got, that's where I think it got jumped ahead a little bit with, oh, let's just make this decision now. I think if it had waited till June 10th, we would have had a chance. It still might have been the same decision. No, we don't like this. But one more week of time with the engineer to come to have a larger discussion about, well, why can't we do this? Why can't we do that? I think would have, I can't speak for Keith and John, but I think that would have helped the process a little bit more be understood as to why we're getting to that decision. And maybe some of those folks that said, yeah, we want to do the sidewalk would have shown up at that meeting. So that's my timeline. that I-
Thank you, Josh. Yeah.
I'm not talking about your timeline for that, okay,
Oh.
the engineering discussion, all that kind of stuff. I am specifically talking about, you had one hearing where UVM stuff was presented, and then the next meeting you had UVM and the other kind of technology, you brought them in to talk about their technology. So my point is the technology discussion about the cemetery and the graves, not any other engineering, just that had been heard by the time the select board made their decision, and it was discussed at 2 different public hearings. So I just want to give the select board credit for waiting to make that final decision until they had that piece of information.
But my point is,
Sure,
they
yeah.
made that final decision during public comment before they even had the information on the ground penetrating radar.
Right.
Like they made it an hour before the ground penetrating radar discussion was had. You're right, they were hearing that there was concerns about the cemetery and they were taking steps to address that. But I think the decision to stop the whole, I know the decision to stop the whole process happened minutes, if not hours of that. They had it, well, sure, but they said, before they even heard from the ground penetrating radar experts, they said, nope, we're gonna stop the project right now. Then we heard the presentation from ground penetrating radar, and everybody sort of said, thanks, but no thanks, it's not conclusive. Because the question then was, does the cemetery commission, would they like to proceed with doing the ground penetrating radar just to sort of know what's underneath? And the feedback we got was, it's really not gonna be conclusive for the amount of money you'd spend.
Yeah.
Why are we gonna bother? Because we're not gonna have to put a sidewalk anywhere. We already decided that, so.
I think at that point right there, hang on, Karen.
Well, they did, well, they had some information, but the presentation hadn't been done.
At that point right there, we should have gone back to the Transportation Committee and said, here's what we got.
Yeah.
One more cycle just in their wheelhouse, I think,
And-
would have been good. Or maybe there were no solutions, but we don't really know.
I think you can make a case that the select board, including me, panicked.
Yeah.
Because
Read the room.
we read the room.
Yeah.
I read my phone line.
Mhm.
Some people had decided that I personally was going to rip up the cemetery and put the community kitchen out of business. The fact that we had, and I tried to have discussions with some people from my church about this, and they had, everything I said was replied to with, well, I heard.
Yeah.
Well, I heard. I'm like, but I'm telling you,
Right.
as a member of the select board, no, that's not true.
Mhm.
And they just kept saying, well, I heard. And at that point, I'm like, okay, a lie will run around the world 6 times while the truth is still putting on its boots.
Yeah.
And at that point, I'm just like, I don't see us winning on this.
Yeah.
But
Mhm.
was it the best decision we made? Should we have stuck the course and at least had the meeting on the 10th? Almost certainly.
So we
Yes.
learned. I mean, everybody learned from this,
Yeah.
I think so. So how to use
Um,
what we learned.
Yeah, I was just saying, trying to, maybe reorient ourselves back towards moving into the present and future. I am not of the opinion that any committee is entitled to any of the projects it's working on, whether it's a sidewalk, whether it is trails, whether it is town center renovations. All of these decisions are ultimately to be made either by the select board or under the guidance of the people of the town through elections. So the fact that there's no sidewalk, it's not a failure. If anything, it is showing that certain things in the town of Richmond work quite well, and that there were mistakes made in terms of engagement. And but in my line of work, we try to do sort of it's called a no blame culture, where you don't point fingers at each other, but instead you try to dissect, here's what went wrong. We should have communicated, or maybe we have a checklist for every business owner, landowner that's affected by a given project. So I think things like that are super helpful. But to me, I mean, being newer to Richmond, newer to the Transportation Committee, especially when Amy came to our meeting along with Rob, I mean, that to me, I mean, I'm not a small business owner, but if I were and I saw anything that would affect my ability to do business, I would absolutely do what I could to change that. And they were being proactive and engaged, and should be applauded for that, because they were trying to make solutions, and unfortunately the solutions never panned out. But to me, there's a lot of good in all this. And I think just because a project or projects fail doesn't mean, we should burn the Transportation Committee to the ground.
No, we definitely should not do that.
I'm hoping a lot that at least maybe a couple of your departed members would think it over and maybe come back. They've got experience. They've got, they're still warm. It's like, I know.
I don't know if that will happen, but
Okay.
there were many
At least find someone.
engaged citizens last week. Well, at least one of whom is here. We are, if the Transportation Committee is going to continue, we are open for membership. Of course, it has to be approved by the select board, but I mean, that would be my message to the town. And I'm not really a front porch forum or social media person, but I'd be happy to make another post just encouraging people to be involved.
Remind me, when the Transportation Committee was regularly meeting, were there meetings on Zoom?
We did meet on Zoom.
Okay, so it falls on me among others to watch what's out there, but
It's a lot of work. I mean,
Right.
whoever has a job has to make the decision, family job or.
Yeah.
Numbers on that one, Bill?
There were 5.
No, how many are seats? How many seats?
Oh, 5.
5 seats?
Yeah. Are there, again, maybe stupid question territory, but are there reporting mechanisms where a committee can give information to the select board outside of a meeting? Because I know there's various rules about working on a Google Doc together. Does that fall under a meeting, emails, et cetera? But
Josh is the best one to answer. that.
okay,
Yeah, it really should be at a public meeting on an
Okay.
agenda item. So
Public needs
if
a
you wanted
chance
to do
to-
a mid-course check-in, say, on a scoping study,
Mhm.
you would bring that to the board and say, here's where we're at so far, here's the midterm report, and this is where we're going, to sort of check in to say, is this where you want us to go? And I think the board would encourage more committees to come forward more frequently with updates to make sure that projects are going the way.
Really more what's going wrong
Right.
than what's going right. The right stuff seems to be obvious, but when things are going sour, people tend to kind of not look at it. So. I gotta say, I've gone back through some of the documents from the Transportation Committee and read them finally. Should have read them sooner, but the safety improvements that would be gained by that sidewalk installation were pretty big. We're talking, pedestrian safety, a lot of the things that we've gathered as comments in our parallel meeting that we still need to prioritize. So it's still there. The problems are still there. And
Yeah.
the only way to address them is to do something physical with that road.
right, but if we heard it once, we heard it 10,000 times, but there's no businesses where you're wanting to put in the sidewalk. The businesses are on the other side, and I would say it's about safety. Well, they can cross the street. Well, there are people that
That's
are
the
complaining.
safety issue.
There
One
are
of
people
them.
who complain because to go from point A to point B, they have to cross the street 3 times. Well, and at the end of the day, it was just obvious that it was like rebel without a cause. What are you rebelling against? What do you got?
Matt, go ahead.
I see you've been there.
Hi there. I didn't expect to hang on this long, but then I figured I'd kind of just kind of listen to what was going on while I was on my computer working.
Good for you.
Yeah, so this actually particular issue is kind of quite important to me, living right off Pleasant Street and off East Main Street. And also I understand the concerns of the business owner, because owning small businesses and trying to keep your patrons coming is certainly difficult, and I don't think there's any simple solution to this. My hope would be we continue exploring this because it is quite dangerous. There is a vast majority of people, small families that use this, would use that sidewalk on that side of the street. Maybe there's a way where the sidewalk can be built on the steep section, and where the parking is for her business, it's kind of like it is in front of the grocery store currently. Would sometimes the sidewalk probably be covered up partially by, by cars? Yes, but still it's much safer than having to cross the street in that area there between the bridge, the big spruce, etc. Anyways, I kind of hope we keep continuing this. It was under my assumption that this was going to be paid for with one-time funds. That's correct?
ARPA funds and grant funds.
Yeah, right. So from a financial perspective, have we decided something else to do with those funds now that they're not going to be used for this? I mean, in my mind, it was kind of again, I understand you don't want to go out of business because people can't park there anymore. That's really frustrating. But there's a still significant safety concern there. And if Bridge Street doesn't have any kind of, any kind of speed bumps or anything like that, I mean, it's inevitable people are going to be speeding up and down that street. It happens. So it's just my piece.
Thank you, Matt. Virginia?
Yeah, I'm just wondering if there's been any discussion about the funds that are going to have to be repaid for refusing the grant.
That's actually next on our agenda.
Yep. I mean, it seems a little ironic that you had the whole pedestrian discussion like after the sidewalk was turned down, instead of maybe trying to get people together and have that discussion at the time that we were thinking about the sidewalk. But anyway, it would be helpful for people to know about the money that may have to be repaid on the grant that was turned down.
Yes. Kara?
I think the sidewalk discussion, the safety discussion stemmed from canceling the sidewalk. So I think you guys are doing a proactive thing with that. So thank you. I appreciate that brainstorming session. But on the side of the sidewalk, the three major reasons why you guys went against putting the sidewalk in was the railroad hadn't been contacted. No work had been done with the railroad from what the public hearing.
No, they had been contacted.
There was a design with the railroad all set.
So that was
Talked to the railroad. He personally told me that.
Well, that was part of the process, yeah, where the engineer and Keith were reaching out to the railroad to.
He said he had.
I don't know if I don't know if they'd actually contact them. I think they kind of wait for final design, but I don't think the railroad was holding up the process just yet. I mean, they've held up processes, but I don't think that they were yet holding up this process.
So that railroad hadn't been contacted yet. The cemetery was still an issue. So if I know Matt's talking about still wanting it, but the cemetery was something that held you back, losing the handicap parking spaces and impacting the business.
That's all based on early sketches without seeing final engineering, which may have had some ability to mitigate or reduce or eliminate those problems. So we don't know. It was all blown up before that. Right. We don't know. And everything else is just, as Jay said, well, I heard.
Well, so John, directly from Keith Oborn's mouth to Rob and I, we were told, you're going to have to be without your parking. The Transportation Committee has shot down the two designs that we proposed to the Transportation Committee, and that they were rejected for any number of reasons, which I don't question, because I am not an engineer. We just proposed ideas that we thought could play side by side with parking and sidewalks. And Matt, it turns out that there are a lot of stipulations around that. So it's trickier than it at first appears. And there's a grandfathered thing, whatever. I don't want to get into those details again, but the point is that we went to a town official and we were told by that town official that those designs had been rejected and that the sidewalk was going to go in and our parking was going away. And that is what I mean by being backed into a corner. And so I don't know whether the authority was there for him to tell us that, but that is how it transpired.
Yeah.
And so.
We've had that discussion before, and I'll say, I don't recall the Transportation Committee ever seeing, let alone voting on.
So that's
yeah.
part of the process problem, right? I
But-
mean,
but
that's
the-
what needs to be
well,
figured out.
Correct. Well, there's a process between the committee and town governance, town staff, as well as with the select board. And I'll say, the other piece was the last time I heard from the town planner about it, he says, like, when I said, what are we doing to preserve or mitigate? He said, we're working on it. So I had not heard the piece that you had said, you had just told me, but I also hadn't seen your designs.
And I don't know if the meeting that I had with you and Keith and a few others was before or after he made that comment, but I know that after that meeting, we took some thoughts from you and Rob and I think your other business partner and said, okay, we'll go back to the engineer. We'll look at these designs. We were trying to figure out what could we legally do? What could she design based on codes and standards that she had to meet? And that was going to be part of the June 10th meeting was, okay, we've looked at these designs. Here's what we think we can do. Here's what we can't do. So we were still trying to work on it. My apologies if we didn't keep you in the loop as far as, hey, we're still trying to work on this. But after that meeting, we were still trying to figure out what designs could we do to make this work. I don't know if we were going to find a workable solution that was going to be amenable to you and to the engineer and to the select board, but we hadn't given up.
So again, we can follow the chain of emails and texts that went back and forth between Keith and Rob. And we were told that it was a done deal, and that would have been a whole different arrangement if the engineer had been, all the engineer did was come to RCK and meet with us and hear our ideas and then draft those. And what we were told is that those two designs were presented to the Transportation Committee, and the Transportation Committee said they can't happen because they're uncomfortable about the backing out into the, I mean, I can play that all out, but that your timeline is not how it happened, Josh. And that's what I keep saying about being backed into a corner. The petition came out of that because we needed to pause it. We were asking for a pause so that we could have these conversations and actually understand with some transparency what was happening, because we were getting such mixed messages. So I'm trying to return it to the Transportation Committee and the discussion about process, because I do think it's really important. I think there needs to be a clear process and there need to be clear roles about who does what in that process. And that is where things may have gotten miscommunicated in this case.
Well, there's a lot of lessons learned already, and that's a big one right there. Communication at the right time to the right people is.
That might need more, sorry if I'm seeing out of turn, might need more diving into, because we don't, I don't know where the camera is, but I'm sorry to hear all that, Amy. Is that one?
Yeah.
Oh, no, I think
There's cameras everywhere.
anyways,
It can switch.
Mhm.
MFC TV.
I have had to miss Transportation Committee meetings because of work, traveling, etc. But we don't typically, you don't recall that either. I mean, there was never a time where designs were brought to us, because one, I would not have, it's not something we do as a committee. We don't do design work. That would be through engineers and the town planner. So I would be interested to learn more about that, because being as myself in the Transportation Committee, having those spaces be supportive of your business was very important to me.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sit down and draw a Venn diagram before we embark on this again. And all right, who all overlaps? It's probably everybody overlaps.
Well, and confusingly, two of us are named Keith. So
And my middle name is Keith, so it just.
okay, yeah.
So I think Rob has his hand up and he may be able to clarify.
Yeah.
Rob, did I say anything that was inaccurate?
No, you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
All right, so there's two plans were drawn up and brought to my attention backhandedly that allegedly Keith and the Transportation Board or his engineers had derived for us, and we weren't even shown them, and then they were just both completely nagged. And I agree with Amy on this, Josh. We came to meet with you about this, and you didn't even really tell us they were nagged until I kind of pushed a little bit. And I said, oh, I guess we have to have a meeting then, because you were kind of letting me believe that there might still be a chance for this. you know, because we had these two hard plans that were drawn up and paid for, that now the transportation committee is saying they haven't even seen. I mean, where did these plans go? Where did they come from? Josh, can you answer us on this, please?
I know that Keith had looked at them. I don't think he actually went to the full committee. I think he talked to, did he talk to Chris and to Bard? We were talking about it a bit. We were trying to figure out what could we do to work with this. That's when we sat down with you to say, we don't think, we're not sure if these can work, but then you came up with some other ideas. We said, all right, we'll go back to the engineer. We'll try to see if there's anything else that she can think of or if she can make this work. So there was a lot of back and forth. There was, I'm sure, some miscommunication here and there, but we were, especially after we had that meeting, I was trying to see what we could do to make it work. And then to come to June 10th to say, okay, we've looked at a bunch of ideas. Here's what we think is workable. Here's what's not. How can we make this go forward? So
I forget Keith's exact words when I found out about these drawn up, you know, plans for in front of the Richmond Community Kitchen was something to the tune of, oops, you saw those? I mean, that's not very professional. I mean, that's not the exact wording. I'm trying to find it right now, the exact wording, but it was very similar to that. It was kind of insulting.
Matt, go ahead.
You're on mute, Matt.
Thank you.
Yeah, so it seems to me there's a lot of he said, she said. I'm not going to even delve into that. My issue, a couple of things would be try to simplify this into how long are these funds available to use? One, not long, right? Somebody say that? I tried to. How long?
No.
That window might already be closed.
There are multiple pots of money from multiple entities with different expiration dates.
If it's already hard enough in a small town, I think, to pass any kind of major infrastructure projects like this. Main Street has still, at least is still waiting new sidewalks. It's been almost 20 years since I grown up in this town, and East Main Street still has, you know, paved sidewalks. So if the town ends up having to pay for it, that's going to make it even harder because a lot of people are going to obviously boot it down from a financial perspective. I guess my simple thing would be, is there a way to actually put this to a public vote at some point sooner than later? I mean, just make it democratic instead of 3 people deciding or 5 people deciding, and whatever happens at that point.
Matt, I gotta say, a public vote requires that the public be really well informed by the town, and that they realize they're well informed, and that they make decisions based on that information. And that's a tough call. That's a pretty tough.
Right.
We talked about the public, because that was part of the petition. And the guidance that we got from the attorney was that the power to spend money on sidewalks, either for maintenance or for installation of new sidewalks, rests with the select board. So a public vote would not be binding, it would be advisory only.
Exactly.
And it can have challenges doing that and it would have to be an in-person vote because we can't do it on an Australian ballot. So we had explored that at a couple of meetings, and at this point, not before an advisory vote.
Well, no matter, the communication paper trail here seems to be very murky, but I have no reason to doubt that Amy's telling the truth. And if she was told what she was told, then I don't blame her in the slightest for being upset and angry and taking the steps she did. To be told, you're just out of luck.
Yeah.
We're going to close your business because we're going to take away your parking because, well, just because. That's unconscionable. And in whatever way that was said, that should not have happened. And when people find out that public input is being actively discouraged, even in a small extent, even for a small part of the project, it doesn't encourage them to trust the rest of the project. And I think that's real, you know, if one little part is rotten, why trust the rest? And I think that's where we really went wrong. And I say we collectively, I don't know why Keith told Amy what he told.
Yeah.
I just don't.
Well, he may have had a wrong impression also.
Well, a lot of good discussion, but I don't think we're going to have any answers tonight, but this is certainly something we can pick up at a future meeting. Looks like we've got some investigating to do and questions to answer.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to bring up the point, though, that the safety concerns still hold.
It's still there.
They're still there, right?
It's still
now,
there.
been fixed. And I hope we can do something, we, the town, do something about those before something bad happens.
Well, all we need to do is cut a swath on the east side of Bridge Street and add about 12 feet of land.
There you go, yeah.
Problem
I talked
solved.
to the bank manager today and he said, you know, I'd lose my handicap parking spot. Well, he has to have one by
Right.
law. Well, you know, that's holding up, moving their
Well,
abutment or their bridge, their wall.
Yeah.
absent a sidewalk, that just
Mhm.
means we have that much more reason to do what we can with all possible speed in the other areas, lighting, better marked crosswalks,
Signage.
signage, flexible delineators.
Narrow the
Strong
road,
Transportation Committee.
make the road narrower, people will drive slower.
Interesting, yeah.
Kara?
I think you have to have your, next one is your public outreach to add a minimum of third member so that they can actually have a meeting, transportation committee. So
Mhm.
I think just like you did for the town center committee, if anybody thought they had input into it or anybody who voted against something, why don't you get on board and help us solve these problems? I think it's an approach to have people be proactive and ask them, you know, if they think the transportation committee's direction, if they've questioned it, and then be part of the team in the beginning. And I think that's a positive way to do it. And get people with different backgrounds or different even philosophies on how to deal with safety issues. I think you should welcome that, and I think it would help these guys move on with even the safety issues that you're gonna try to address on Bridge Street.
There is a
So I
potential
wish them
pool
luck.
to tap. This room was standing room only a week ago.
Mhm.
So I'm just, you know, and I think that was, was it Andy Bissett who put out the posting? If you voted no, go to the next meeting, and people went to the next meeting and said why they voted no. So it
Yeah.
might be a call for people who would have a little bit different.
Yeah.
Different perspective.
Okay. Anything else?
No,
No, I think we just need to find third and
well, you
Or-
may need more than that.
Yeah.
You definitely need more than that.
Yeah.
But I'll say I'm still ambivalent about what my role should be. We talked about the process part, there's the funding part, there's the substantive work that needs to be done, and just not unsure.
John, what would it, well, I know you just said what it would take, but
Mhm.
what would you like to see first or the most, or? I'm gonna try to pin you down. I know you don't want to be pinned down.
I mean, significantly, if this group is gonna do more than just
Mhm.
put together the next study, it's gonna need, if actual substantive, infrastructure is gonna be built, we're gonna need funding on a scale that the town has been, for decades unwilling to spend.
Mhm.
So what role, how are we seen by funders?
Mhm.
Yeah.
What's V-Trans and CCRPC gonna say? It may be that it's more effective to be quiet for a few years and wait till there's funding there, or I don't know,
Mhm.
but
A good question for Barb.
yeah. I mean, if it's certainly the select board could put more money, direct more money towards infrastructure needs, but it's gonna be small little pieces, and that could be a smaller committee that that could help you round out that list. But as far as a committee with the goal of a sort of really trying to put together bigger plans and help tee up for you guys things that you want done.
Mhm.
I don't know if, I'm just not sure what this committee could do right now.
Mr. Chairman, I think, I'm not gonna make a motion, but it seems like if the Transportation Committee could at least function as a committee, we'd have to reduce it to 3, which kind of shoots us in the other foot of recruitment, but we can certainly expand it back up to some larger number. I don't know what the right thing to do there is, but if you and Keith are willing to.
I think
help
it's a
guide
lot to
us.
dump on the two of them, to be honest.
It
I'm
is.
locked in. So if we need 2 more members, we need 2 more members. So
Mhm.
I-
Okay.
I would, I mean, I can't vote obviously, but I would suggest that we say as 5, because I think maybe it is a period of quiet and we can support the town in Bridge Street improvements and forget about some of the bigger picture ideas for a while. And then we can slowly build up, network with the townspeople on what they want to see, what their future of Richmond transportation is. So.
And there's at least theoretically, Cochrane Road scoping and what study, going on that at least was the way it was drafted. It was, reporting to that work would be done through the Transportation Committee and then reported to you. So some entities gotta keep the contractors focused and provide some
And do the
feedback and help
Yeah.
organize locally.
Okay.
Okay,
Try to
thank
find
you.
some
Thanks, everyone.
people. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Next is consideration of approval of a letter to the Secretary of Transportation regarding the funding from the Transportation Alternatives Program that has been received for the Bridge Street Sidewalk Project. Josh, did you want to speak to this?
So at the last meeting, when we reviewed that the V-Trans had asked for the funding to be returned, the board wanted to write a letter to see if we could convince V-Trans to allow us to keep the funding for the sidewalk and put it towards other safety improvements, and also outline why it was returned. Let me make that bigger here.
So we received the grant for the sidewalk. We started spending money on the sidewalk, and then I won't recap the last half hour of discussion.
Where's the
So the state was like, okay, we want our money back. And the town's position is, yeah, but.
there you go. Yeah, but so I can get everybody in here. Okay. So really the meat of this is I outlined the reasons why it was stopped: potential loss of parking spaces in front of the Northfield Bank, potential loss of parking spaces in front of Richmond Community Kitchen, potential to not have enough turning radius for tractor trailers off of Bridge Street onto Railroad Street, potential for a sidewalk to disturb human remains in the area of Richmond Village Cemetery, and potential loss of 2 parking spaces in front of the Richmond Free Library. Due to those concerns, the select board decided to stop work on the project. Then recapped that we had a letter from V-Trans asking for $10,111.70 back. $8,104.45 was directly related to reimbursement that had already been received for an initial request to reimburse for design. $2,007.25 is due to administrative expenses. In addition to the $10,111, there was also a request that I had not yet submitted before the project was stopped of $16,349.35, which would have been the 80% share from the grant to come back for some design. So what I asked for here at the end is that we we keep the 8104, we don't pay the $2,000 in admin fees, and that we further get the $16,349. It'll leave the town with $24,453 in grant funds to then go towards some of the Bridge Street pedestrian improvements. So I wanted to ask the board if there was any edits or thoughts on approach, how you wanted to proceed.
Jay?
Like that.
Mr. Chairman, the letter is detailed and professional, and
Specific.
the state will do what the state will do, but I don't have any edits to it.
The worst they can do is say, no.
Right.
Well, they,
Kara?
I have 2 edits.
Okay.
One is to note that it was 4 handicap parking spaces that were going to be lost. I don't know if they said handicap or just parking spaces.
But it said 2. Yes.
Is handicap or ADA the right wording?
Well, the sign says handicap, right?
Yeah, but what's the right?
88 parentheses handicap.
Yeah, I think the sign says handicap in parentheses ADA, however you want to do that. But my point is that there were 4 spaces that were going to be lost. And we were building the sidewalk for a safety thing, but we were losing. And then the other one is by putting the sidewalk in front of a business, we were going to lose the business. I mean, the loss of a business in the downtown is
Yeah, we can't have that.
substantial. So I don't think it's just the loss of the parking spaces, it's the loss of the business.
So I know the 2 in front of the library. What were the other 2 handicap spaces?
Richmond
One in
Community
front of
Kitchen,
the Richmond Community Kitchen.
Okay, and one at the bank.
the bank, yeah, the bank's handicap spot too.
So I
Which
think
could
the
be
rest of the
moved,
letter
I
is
think.
great, Josh. I mean, I think it's great. I just think those are key things of losing the business, handicap parking spaces.
So if we had potential loss for some parking spaces, including one ADA. Where was the other handicap spot?
One at the bank, one at the
One at the
Richmond
bank?
Community Kitchen.
Yeah, there is at one of the bank.
Yeah, it is.
But I mean, again, I don't know, well, all right. Potential loss for parking.
It's right there by the wall, which would have to move in.
Right.
But I mean, the fact that a potential closure of a business, that speaks to economics.
Yeah, it's a permanent fatality.
All right, so we'll add in, including one ADA handicapped at the bank, including one ADA handicap at Richmond Community Kitchen.
I don't think we have an ADA spot in front of, not one that's marked as such.
There was one on the post. There was
No, the post says that there's a ramp around back.
Oh, okay.
So that, I mean, I don't know, it's not declared one. It could be one because there's nothing around it, but it does not, that sign is so that we can let our customers know that around back, they can park and access the ramp. There isn't actually an ADA parking spot in back either. But the ramp allows them to come up with wheelchairs and walkers, and that's how our elderly folks get in.
Try to get the street view, but it's not working here. All right, so we will take the ADA off of that one.
It's just the four spots that are
Yeah.
at Richmond Community Kitchen.
And then we'll say which could have resulted in the closure of the
Yes,
business.
space.
No space. All right, we'll add those edits. And then Jay, I can print this out for you, or assuming it's approved, David, I can print it out as edited. And you can sign it and we can mail it in.
Okay, so you want a motion on that?
And unless anybody has any suggestions for edits,
Right.
further suggestions. Okay, I guess we're ready for a motion.
Well, I open my mouth. And Mr. Chairman, I move that we direct town manager to send a response letter to V-Trans outlining what's written in it.
Okay,
Pretty circular.
thank you, Lisa. Do we have a second? Okay, motion made by Lisa Miller, seconded by Jay Furr, is to move to approve the letter to the Secretary of Transportation regarding the funding from the Transportation Alternatives Program that had been received for the Bridge Street Sidewalk Project. Any further discussion? Hearing none, seeing none. Calling the motion to a vote, please identify yourself and signify your vote.
Lisa, aye?
Jay, aye. Adam, aye.
And David, I. Motion carries. Thank you. Okay, so next is follow-up on the Western Gateway Scoping Study, bike and pedestrian path from the village to Riverview Commons. So this was presented at the last select board meeting, and we wanted to bring this back up again tonight for next steps. Actually, we've all read the study, which was included in the packet.
So again, it's one of those larger scoping studies, not a ton of detail in it just yet. So there was discussion of, do we try to see if V-Trans will pay for a portion from Riverview Commons to the park and ride? Are there any other actions you'd like to take to try to move all or pieces of this forward? Again, with lack of a transportation committee at this point, we don't really have a body to kind of dig into, real next steps, but the board wanted to bring it back to see what would you like to do? Because I think you wanted some time to think about it over having gotten the presentation.
Last meeting, Bard brought up a good point that the park and ride and the interstate bisected the corridor for pedestrian traffic. So perhaps one could argue the state has a bit of a responsibility in restoring that corridor, and would they like to help fund a solution?
I would also like a pony. I would like to absolutely move toward the portion getting Riverview Commons connected to the park and ride. We had a variety of routes suggested. One of them would be underwater. During flooding, right, Kara?
I don't know, they might have put it higher up the bank and have some kind of bridging thought process to not go through the floodplain. But if it's going through the floodplain, you know that it's flooded all the way to the mobile, so yeah, it'd be underwater if it's lower than the park and ride, because the park and ride flooded.
Right,
Twice.
my uneducated, non-engineer self goes, if you simply ran. Okay, the biggest drawbacks to just running a route directly from the park and ride under the overpass. Similar to what we saw other towns doing, like Williston at exit 12. And then continuing on is that cars likely, it would be hazardous because cars coming off the ramp there. Would not, there was a suggestion of having a right angle turn to slow cars down so they would not be whipping through quite so fast and running over the pedestrians. Do I have that right? That was one of the proposals, because if you're crossing under there, but you're getting, somebody's wanting to go on I-89 northbound, they're just going vroom, and they're not slowing down to let pedestrians cross. So the suggestion had been, let's make that a right-hand corner, so that slows people down, and then you'd be able to run the thing across. That was the approach that I think made the most sense to me, the non-engineer. I saw a couple things that had you doing some of these sinusoidal, let's go up here, down here, up like that. And there may be engineering merit to it, but in terms of just being able to, move forward and get that connector built, it seems to me that a right angle turn and a path that goes directly onto the interstate alongside the existing road makes the most sense. But like I keep saying, I'm not an engineer.
You've done more than the engineers have, because they haven't come up with anything. So,
Kara?
My question is, here's another scoping study, right? That's gonna cost Richmond residents a certain dollar amount. So I think one of the price quotes were 4 million for going through the wetlands and the floodplain. We don't know if we'd be able to go through the wetlands or not, because could do the other route that costs you 10 million and go, was it 10 million was the other price? I don't want to misquote it. 10 million I thought was the other price to go along Route 2 rather than go with the tunnels underneath the ramps. What percentage, if anything, I know you're trying to get the dreaming that the state's going to pay for stuff. But realistically, if we were to do a project right now, what are you looking at?
Bring it back. Sorry.
I'll just.
We're listening.
Sure.
Yeah, I heard your work.
Sure, sort of looked like it did to you, Gary.
What David was trying to share with us was that the Agency of Transportation has, as of a couple days ago or 5 days ago, announced grant programs for improving park and rides.
And the poster for their submission for proposals is the Richmond Park and Ride.
But it's,
They approved it.
but I think it's municipal
Yeah.
park and rides that they're
Yeah.
looking to have grant, that they have grant money to
As
improve.
opposed to state.
That even though they use the picture of
Our Park and Ride.
a state park and ride, I think it's just for municipals.
Because they improved it when they put the whole.
So that's park and ride up in Underhill, the one?
Mm-hmm.
That would be an example of a municipal park and ride.
Right.
That is
Sure.
like 3 spaces. Okay,
Back to my question,
that's your question.
because if you're gonna, this is a bike path. It's not no longer an ADA accessible path. That there was an issue with the ramp coming out of town. There's an issue with the
grade.
ramp, the grade right before going toward the mobile. So that hasn't been defined. They're only landscape, or they're only architectural. They're not engineered. So ADA is in question. So take that off and call it a bike path. A bike path. What is the percentage for Richmond taxpayers to pay for this at this point in time, not based on unknown grants, but rather factual, what is really would apply to this?
Right now, I don't think we have any grant funding.
Right, right.
That would be a I mean, you guys are closer to these studies than I am, but I think the potential next step after a scoping study is usually what grant money is available, what other funding is available, how could we make this happen?
Short answer to the question.
Right, we don't know yet.
And I'll say I wasn't really involved with the Western Gateway scoping study, but there's a lot of extreme difficulties in it.
Yeah.
Like makes the sidewalk look like child's play. So I think there's a lot of very serious challenges, hopefully some opportunity, but I think in all likelihood, it's probably gonna be a piecemeal effort over many years if anything happens, because as you were just talking about with the highway on and off ramps, there's two things in conflict. When people are walking from point A to point B, they like to go the straight way. That's just human nature. So they don't want to do circuitous routes. If they're going from their home to the park and ride, they want it to be convenient. And then the other thing is that every time you have a person on bike or on foot crossing over a road, particularly a highway on and off ramp, you are putting them in danger. So that one opportunity takes you the circuitous route that people don't want to walk, and the other one puts them in the pathway of quickly moving vehicles. So,
So-
there's this.
Follow-up question then. So the answer is, we don't know yet. It's
Right.
premature. So the follow-up question is, how much is Richmond spending on this scoping study? I know that's probably some CCRPC money that's paying for it, some grant money that's paying for it. How much are we spending on this scoping study out of our funds?
I don't off the top of my head, but I believe the study is completed. So we're not spending any more money on it. I think this was the final product, but
Is
John's
it
on.
completed? Is that what you said?
I believe the scoping study is
Okay.
completed, and I don't know, I'd have to look up exactly how much Richmond spent on it, but it was a CCRPC project, so there was part funded by CCRPC, part funded by Richmond.
So my last comment with this is, we don't know how much we've spent on it. Off the top of your head, it's okay. It wasn't part of the presentation tonight. We don't know how much we're going to spend on it. What's the next step with it? I am fearful that we're gonna do yet another scoping study for a vision, and you're going to have a committee work on something that in the end is not, the Richmond taxpayers are not going to be able to afford. There was a $10 million project that was from Volunteers Green out to the park and ride, a previous bike path that Richmond couldn't afford. So you're making Richmond unaffordable for your taxpayers. And I think your taxpayers are going to get some tax bills here with their 6.1% increase and their increase from the state of Vermont, and are gonna have a little bit of shock going on. So I just want you to be cautious in having another committee work on a big, large scoping study and continuing down a path. If you could give a realistic number to say Richmond was going to have to pay 25%, are you ready to put $1 million down on a bike path? Or are you ready to put 2.5, whatever percentage it's gonna be down on a bike path or whichever direction we go? I think you'd be better off asking that advisory question to your citizens versus sending a committee in a path and then having and then having everybody be upset because they're upset because they spent years on a project, and the citizens are upset because they don't want to spend that kind of money. I mean, it was going to be $10 million, I think, to put a bike path along Cochrane Road. I mean, those were numbers that were kicked out, different years, different times, with no engineering construction numbers tied to them. Thank you.
Gary,
You mind if I come?
please.
So, I have kind of the opposite viewpoint from Kara.
Really?
It doesn't always happen. We actually agree on quite a bit.
I'm just kidding.
So I want to give a little history. So that for me puts this project in perspective. Around 1974, the last town meeting at the Round Church, we were doing a paper ballot vote, and Marion Ware, whose husband kind of oversaw the church for years, said she was worried about the wood stove heat and whether it was safe because the stovepipes went throughout the inner part of the structure. And so I was on the select board then, and we contacted the fire marshal, and the fire marshal required a structural engineer to do a report. And the report ended up that the stovepipe was fine, but the building was condemned. And it was going to take, after a little study, it was going to take, in today's dollars, about $1 million to fix it. And the town kind of threw up its hands, said, you know, too big, we can't do it, and we're not going to do it. And what followed was the Richmond Historical Society, which had formed a year before, said, we'll take it on. And, it was a group of about a dozen people, and over probably a dozen years, and by breaking the project up into little pieces, like we're just gonna raise money for the foundation repair, we're just gonna, the project move through all the phases, and we have what most people think of as kind of the icon for the town remaining. And then about 15 years later, the monitor barn, which the one that is restored now, used to sit very close to Route 2, was leaning because the high drive was pushing against the barn. It was leaning and it was going to collapse onto Route 2 because it was very close to Route 2. And the Richmond Land Trust, which was a fairly new organization, decided to take it on, and we raised enough money to get the barn dismantled, and then we raised enough to build the foundation. But it was kind of foolhardy. We decided we weren't going to wait till we had all the money. We're going to build a foundation. We're going to start building a structure. We have no idea where we're going to get the rest of the money. We have no use for the building. But by doing it one step at a time, taking small pieces, that building now is another Richmond icon. And now the other monitor barn is under a multi-million-dollar restoration, which would have been lost if we had just thrown up our hands and said, it's too big a project. And it's the same now. Gillette Pond, the state said that dam is failing. The Girl Scouts said, we can't take on a project like that. The Land Trust raised money in a matter of a couple months to buy the property from the Girl Scouts. We thought it would be, from initial scoping, like a $250,000 dam project. It's turned out to be an $800,000 dam project, but the money was raised and it's being done. And now you have another huge project that might be bigger than all those others combined. And to just look at the money at this point, it's just the wrong way. The right way is that, look, the people that live in that park are disconnected. Asking them to let their kids ride to town by crossing Governor Peck Road, go through that intersection, which is hard for cars, get up onto 117 and another bad intersection, cross in front of 3 interstate entrances there, go past the entrance to the park and ride, past another entrance to the interstate, past the mobile entrance. What parent is going to let their kids do that? A kid wants to ride his bike to school. It's like, oh yeah, take your suicide note and ride to school. But this project, after a lot of study by the scoping committee, has picked a route that is the solution. It's hugely expensive. But if you just look at it in pieces, you could break it down into 4 sections. You could break it down into many sections. Even if you had a 200-foot section that's ready to go, build that section. Start building momentum until you get to the bigger projects, or if you're lucky with the state, build the most expensive section. And over time, this project will not cost anywhere near what you're thinking about. For example, the whole zone where the gateway is, if in fact there's ever water and sewer that's run through there, run it along where you want your bike path. Then while you're doing all that excavating, you're going to shape up. Then you're just talking about paving a bike path, a strip down through there. My suggestion is that don't spend any money on this. You've got a good plan. Form a committee whose only task, and it's probably going to take 15 years to complete it, to find ways, find means. There's many ways of phasing this. You can do sections, or, for example, that section that is proposed to go along the interstate, on the other side of the wetlands before you get to the mobile. You know, my discussions with the wetland person is that if that was proposed as just a trail, you get the bikes who are not road bikes, but mountain bikes might choose to go there, and that section could be built for virtually nothing. I've talked to the owner of that land, and he said, well, look, I'm not committing to anything, but I'm not ruling it out either. Just form a committee, let them focus on this over the years. When opportunities come up, then propose something. I just think this is a huge solution to a huge problem.
Thank you, Gary.
Yeah.
Jay?
I said this last time when we discussed this. This is the number one economic inequity that we have in our town. To basically have a whole section of our town and be told, if you had access to the park and ride, you could catch the bus, you'd have access to all kinds of things. Oh, well.
But you don't.
But you don't.
Mhm.
The thing we had back at the end of 2021, the water and sewer district expansion, where the owner of the Riverview Commons had asked us to extend the water and sewer district out there. And then it said, now that you've included that, never mind. Everybody out there at Riverview Commons was basically yelling at us and saying, how dare we? And we're gonna just leave them, just rob them blind to pay for this project none of them wanted. That was when I realized how separate, how what's the term I'm looking for? How ostracized from the rest of the town, people at the Riverview Commons seem to feel, and I think they've got a good point.
Yeah.
I do a lot of walking along our streets, and I agree that it is scary trying to go from, let's just say, the mobile to the Lucky Spot.
Scary to drive it.
Yeah. So I don't think we should say it's too big a project, never mind, but we do need to, be careful to not pay for a platinum plan when a silver plan would do it.
There's something else too. That area out there to the west of the interstate has potential for housing growth.
Mhm.
And there's a fair amount of land north or uphill from the existing Riverview Commons, which could be expanded just by the whim of the owner, and other properties out there too, some of which have been rezoned. They're not a whole lot, I think 10 acres, but that kind of treatment for that area there is also possible. If it could be connected to the village, it'd be a lot better for both ends.
And we've seen the town of Williston made it work. Now, Williston is a bigger town.
Mm.
But I think they might have lessons that we could benefit from. Because at the end of the day, that's what they did is kind of more or less what we want.
Where do you mean?
Right under exit 12 from the Sonesta Suites and the new parking right up there.
Okay.
They made a path that goes right down the eastern side of Route 2A, straight all the way up to, let's say, the Staples parking lot. And it is going under the existing interstate, and it's quite wide. It's you've got room for it's wide.
Mhm.
And that, if we could just like steal that and put it here, that would be a recreational improvement, but it would also be a major get people to where the bus is.
Can I add that, don't rule out that plan that goes to the right once you get through what you're talking about. Because I have to say, that's the part of the plan that I have seen people most excited about.
Okay.
And I also have found over the years that it is the big, bold plans that are easier to raise money for. It's not the dumbed down versions. Nobody's interested in handing over $50,000 towards a project that is, in your words, dumbed down.
Yeah.
So.
One thing, Mr. Chairman, we can do is naming rights.
Yeah.
Heal the people's.
The Gary Bresser Recreation Path.
It's already in the.
I appreciate Gary bringing up history of projects that private or nonprofits have had to raise money for, that are properties like the Round Church and the Monitor Barn that are not on our tax rolls, so they don't pay taxes for those properties. They're tax exempt. So that's only by creating this bike path, potentially, is impacting the property taxes of those who you're trying to help if you don't get federal and state monies to do it. There are Jonesville, you never talk about Jonesville. We've talked about having sidewalks down on Jonesville side of things. There's a post office down there. There's a little community down there that that Richmond forgets that Jonesville, we had a select board member say, well, why don't you have Jonesville deal with your questions or your parking issues?
Yes, that's right, they did.
Okay, our own select board member.
They didn't know we were
So
part
when
of
we
town.
want to talk about, want to talk about parts of town that we keep focusing on, the Gateway has been focused on ever since the water expansion. And I worked for the park owner. I worked on that park expansion. He wanted to put senior housing in. He had plans already to go. And the current select board, in case Lisa, you were on it, so I wanted to give you this history. And anybody else who wasn't on it at the time, I think it was maybe only David and Bard here at that time. The current select board was not willing to support the expansion of the mobile home park so that it would justify him paying to put the mobile home park onto the expanded water system and sewer system. So the park owner said, no, I'm not moving forward with this project. He wasn't in and out. He was totally invested in the expansion of the water and sewer through the Gateway as long as he could expand housing. And it was not going to happen. And he spent money on engineering. So I have a tote full of documentation on that. So I've got that history. So to say we are now concerned about the mobile home park and how it's part of our community, I've been here my whole life. And so it's refreshing to hear that you care about it now, but it always hasn't been cared about. And it's only been cared about when it could benefit the Gateway, because that's how the discussion started. They needed the mobile home park on the Gateway expansion to justify the numbers with getting money from federal and state government.
Right.
Because they needed the people's median income in that area to drive Richmond's numbers down. And so I'm very cautious that we're going to tout putting in a bike path that really goes from the village of Richmond to the park and ride as one of the key primary pieces that we fought to try to get. You fought with V-Trans for years to try to get the expansion of Route 2 widened, and you have pinch points. I think that's what they were called, right?
Yep.
Okay, so I think if this is a project that you want to put together a committee that fundraises for, go get the money, find the grants, do all that kind of stuff without maxing out your taxpayer who is already being pinched right now come their next tax bill. Great. But to do a project and to have a committee working on something that is in the end going to cost the taxpayer that they're not ready to cut the check for, that's my concern. Is because
I completely agree. That was my proposal. I have a committee that looks for alternative ways to fund this.
And not the taxpayer,
Well, I mean, yeah, Richmond's taxpayer.
not the Richmond taxpayer.
Yeah.
100%. Gary and I, look, we're in agreement, Gary.
Yeah, I think we should have those people in Oklahoma pay for it. I would prioritize the park and ride Riverview Commons.
Yeah.
And if we can do a bike path at some point to the village proper, outstanding. But I think if we can do only one thing out there, it should be the Riverview Commons to the park and ride.
I agree.
And that's all several other pieces.
Well, I mean, I'm not gonna quote the entire thing like I sometimes do, but we passed a resolution of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And when we tell people cope, you find a way to get to the park and ride, it's not equitable and it's not inclusive.
Right.
And if it's gonna have any meaning at all, we have to walk we have to walk the talk.
So next steps.
Thank you, Jay. Yeah. Well put.
Invade Williston, take their bike path. No, pursue grant funding aggressively with whatever resources we have to do it is gonna
That's
have
the
to,
question.
But Gary wants to fundraise. Don't stop his committee.
Well, that's where we get back to naming rights, I think.
Well,
The Gary Brett.
I'm not just saying that,
This,
I think
that's
that there
an
should be.
interesting
Oh. No, the LaBounty Bresser bike path.
We're not joking. He
I know.
seriously can raise money. He knows how to do it.
I,
By all means.
I'm
let's do
not
that.
saying that
Are
the
people gonna ask
committee
you
I'm
what we'll
proposing
do?
should just be looking at fundraising. The committee should be looking at all ways that we can build this without impacting the local taxpayer.
Yes.
I think that'd be a great idea.
Maybe appoint Gary to the Transportation Committee with a special project, the Transportation Committee to look into funding for the path.
This
As a
ideas,
thought.
they've been through that several times.
Would you accept the nomination, Gary?
I'd be happy to be on that committee, but I mean, I would want it. I don't want to be on a committee like the Transportation Committee because there's so much they're doing. I don't want to lose the focus.
wanna
Right
be-
now, they're not doing anything.
Well,
Just
you're
your
doing a good job at it.
No, they're wishing they were doing something.
But to have a subcommittee of the Transportation Committee who only focuses on one thing, even though not exactly.
That's why I laugh, subcommittee of what?
Yeah.
But yeah, I hear you want to be very focused on one
Yeah.
thing, so maybe that's not the right solution, so.
Well, I think the Share the Road subcommittee worked quite well as a subcommittee of the Transportation Committee.
Yeah, true. Good
Yeah.
point.
But they gave away things. They didn't ask for money, so.
All comes full circle, right?
But yeah, let's not lose this, this thought. That's, how do we, what's next? What do we do to make this get past the talking stage?
That's
First
resolution
50,000 on the
saying that
table, or-
Since the select board that we pursue this,
Mm.
encourage the committee to start fundraising, pursue grants.
Can you create an ad hoc committee?
Not gonna use term, sorry.
What was the term ad hoc committee that you used at your previous select board meeting? Can you create an ad hoc?
We can
committee
create an ad
for-
hoc committee.
For that purpose that Gary is speaking specifically to is to quote, find funding outside the Richmond taxpayer for the bike path.
Mr. Chairman,
And
I
some
move that we
sketches.
create an ad hoc committee for the purpose of exploring and raising funds for this recreation path.
I will second that. Can I add that we should stipulate who it reports to or has some kind of connection to the town? I mean,
You want to say where the
Where-
recreation path is, J2, so it's not Cochrane Road.
I didn't hear.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, I move that we create an ad hoc committee to explore and develop funding for a recreation path running along West Main Street to include possibilities of Riverview Commons to the Park and Ride and Park and Ride to downtown Richmond, and will report to the Richmond Selectboard.
Second accepts.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, calling the motion to a vote.
J.I.
Lisa, aye.
Adam, I.
Adam's thinking.
David, I. Motion carries. Thank you, Jay. Thank you, Lisa.
And thank you, people in the
Thank you,
audience,
Gary.
for your thoughts, which I think are very helpful.
Yeah, that's
Thank
for,
you. That's
Do you
for
have to take
doing this.
nominations or can you put Gary on now?
we can put
Mr.
Gary
Chairman,
on
I
now.
move we appoint Gary Bresser to the ad hoc committee for the recreation path.
I will second. Gladly.
Calling the motion to a vote.
Lisa, aye.
J.I.
Adam, I.
David, I. Gary, do you want to be on the transportation committee?
No. You almost tricked me. I almost said yes.
Hey, Mark, you've
This is
got
good stuff.
unlimited free time, right?
Members are that,
I know, Rex done.
how many members are that committee?
Well, there's 5 seats.
I mean,
Okay.
if you have to
Oh,
make
this
We did not designate how many members would be on this committee because we didn't think of that.
Well, I think Gary should advise us.
Yeah,
Gary will get back to us with that.
Okay.
and then the next meeting, if you
Maybe
say,
if
let's
one-
make it a
Yes, sir.
5-member committee.
Make sure you follow
People
the
that
meeting law.
Need things to do.
Everything you do now. It's a public meeting, Gary.
But right, but then Josh can maybe post it before your next select board meeting, so you can maybe have people.
Make
apply.
an informed decision about how big we should make it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Mhm.
if you know rich, deep-pocketed people out there or people with embarrassing secrets, by all means, please let us know.
But second classification, yes, I do those, but deep pockets are hard to come by these days.
Well, regardless, I think
Hmm.
there's nothing wrong with looking for out-of-the-box solutions, though it's a cliche.
Right.
Sometimes it works.
Mhm.
Just need to find the path.
Yeah. Actually, Gary, I think you put us on this spot path to start with, so thank you. Oh,
We are way over time, but that's okay. Discussion of staffing request for recreation.
oh, yeah. That's why Mark is here.
I'm up with this.
Okay.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, guys, all of you.
Boy, we cleared the room.
Found the nugget.
Mark.
How are we? So, I don't know if you had a chance to take a look at, that, submittal. I didn't get till
The job description?
Josh until Saturday, but and a little late notice. I think yes, that's it. And really,
Yeah.
short and sweet. And those are the bullet points. We didn't want to really go into intense detail because we just don't know what
Mhm.
the position actually will manifest as, but basically taking over those responsibilities that that Josh has now for managing rec
Mhm.
and hopefully expanding that with grant writing and fundraising.
Anything left for Josh to do though?
Let's not say that.
Oh, I think you'll find a
Already
couple
another
things to
admin.
keep him busy.
Yeah.
Mark, do you have any idea about how many hours a week we'd need to create this position as? Are you thinking this would be 20 or fewer?
Definitely part-time.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
But is it a halftime or is it a?
I 24 hours a week. I mean, it depends on what's in the budget and it depends on the capabilities of the person. I mean, if they can do a lot more work in grant writing and that kind of thing, it may be worth having more time and if it's just scheduling and coordinating, less time.
This might be something we need to grow into essentially, and the holder of the job
Right,
needs to grow
right.
into also. So maybe we start out slow with as long as we have expansion possibility as needed. I'm kind of looking at Josh to, can you manage something like that? It's sort of a person's job will morph into like a job and a half after a while and then
Yeah.
2 jobs. And
So I think one way to look at this is, I'll be coming back for the FY26 budget with a more formal proposal for increased administrative staffing. Probably loop Mark in on those conversations about, okay, if we had more admin staff, what jobs would they be focusing on? What would their job description be? What of this could they pick up? Some of this might already, I haven't had a chance to share this with Duncan. I know he mentioned to me, he's like, oh, I already do grab a few recreation things, like he does the park use forms and things like that. So there might be a way to add this into some of the job description. I don't know if we'd have 25 hours in that job description. Maybe, there might be a little bit less and maybe some efficiencies there. So I think that could be part of the conversation. And as far as benefits goes, I think it's once you reach 30 hours, you are on health insurance and it might be like 30 hours for VEMRs as well.
Right, but what you just said makes sense. We'd already been talking about making Duncan full-time and then adding another body to, because there's just that much work. Well, it would seem to me that these duties could fall under, depending on the skill set, they could fall under that new position.
Right, I think as we look at how would we want to restructure and what position would we want to add, we haven't figured that stuff out just yet, but I think this could certainly be part of the conversation of, okay, could it fit in? If so, how? So that, I don't know if any of these things you need to have done like right now, talk to me, we can try to figure it out. But if it's things that, okay, yeah, over a course of a budgeting season, we can look into, then yeah, happy to add that into the conversation. Well, the rec committee's got some stuff queued up, but I can wait. Well, again, if there's things you want to implement now, depending on what it is, we could maybe provide some staff support,
Well,
not a ton, maybe.
I think that's really going to depend on how the Three Parks Committee comes along and what happens there. And that is, I think, the focus for this summer is just getting those park modifications defined. And then once the ARPA money has been spent improving the park infrastructure, then we can figure out what those responsibilities are actually going to be. But I mean, at least in my interest right now, and the pre-existing rec committee and the Three Parks Committee, it's a hard focus on
getting this ARPA allocated money defined and in place with the improvements.
And right now, just implementing, they came to me 2 weeks ago with, here's everything from Round Church and Brown's Court. And I mean, it was handed over beautifully, but I still have to execute on that and get the final bids and everything put together. So, I mean, I know they're continuing to work on volunteer screening. But yeah, there again, it's sort of a balance between committee work and staff work.
Yeah, it'd be nice if you had some help with that.
Which is part of my request a couple weeks ago to the
Yeah,
board of like,
yeah.
these are the types of things that I need more administrative help with, whether it's recreation or mitigation grants and implementing those types of projects too. Because yeah, between flooding and ARPA money, those two things alone have created quite a few projects.
Right.
So.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, I mean, I would certainly be available as this evolves. In any way I can help you, Josh, or board to help develop this position and flush it out more. But I just wanted to give you some talking points and some thoughts about what it is that could encompass this position and the things that are going on in the parks that need management.
Have we detached Huntington and Bolton from our rec committee?
Yes, you did.
We told them to get out of town.
Okay, did they go?
They did.
Yeah. Do we want to rethink that?
I do not.
Yeah.
It has caused,
other way?
even in my short amount of time on the select board, I've heard. That's my top 10 things people complain to me about. Why are we letting these people who don't give us any money have decisions on our recreation?
First of all, I think that's silly. That
But that's what-
argument,
yeah.
that argument is inane. It's not based in logic, because everything we did do and would do is for the benefit of Richmond first. So, you know, if they want to make that argument, then maybe they could step forward and volunteer on the rec committee and see the direction of the money that's being spent, and maybe learn a little bit about how much members from the other towns contributed and enhanced the productivity of the rec committee when it was in place. I'm sorry that they have that opinion. I think it's short-sighted. I'd be glad to talk to anybody who disagrees with me about that. Feel free to reach out. I'd be happy to explain it deeper.
Right here.
Oh, I'd happy to explain it deeper.
Explanation. I have my opinion, and my opinion is we do not have, in the town center committee, we don't have Huntington and Bolton sitting on that, and they come into our town center too. So I can have my opinion, and I will most definitely.
Well, I'd love to have you as an active member on the rec committee.
This is done, and that committee is done with working on getting improvements. I have no problem helping with figure out maintenance and how we maintain what we've got. It's just a maintenance plan that we've got to put into place. I know we just expanded the administration position. I do not support a separate recreation position. I think it can be built into the administrative work, because I think there's crossover that happens between the town manager, the assistant town, I think we should have assistant town manager and administrative staffing for them. And I think it should be built into that, so that you aren't pigeonholing one person and they only do recreation, where they can help out possibly with helping manage the FEMA grants, or helping do RFPs, or helping doing other areas. So a broader job description that allows them to do more than just one pigeonhole thing area. I strongly recommend that, so that you don't, so you get a broader range of people applying for the position. I don't remember, Josh, was it a full-time position that they approved last time, or a part? I know it's temporary, but
Part-time.
next budget, full-time?
Part-time,
Part-time.
temporary.
So, and I think you were taking some stuff off of Duncan's plate and some stuff off of your plate to do that. So I really think that as Josh thinks about his reorganization of his admin, that you're better off going that route, because I know from about 10 years ago, when they tried to get a rec director voted through with the voters or discussed in public and all of those kinds of things, it's the first thing the public says is, oh, you're trying to spend this unnecessary money and blah, 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 blah. So it turned out negative and swung recreational stuff in the wrong direction back then versus what I think you're trying to do is increase your recreational activities at the same time doing a capital plan to maintain and do maintenance. And I know for the past 3 to 5 years, the rec committee hasn't been spending all of their maintenance money because they weren't aware of it. So
Exactly.
What's that?
So exactly the point is we need somebody who can manage that and keep the rec committee informed and guided in their work. So it would be a supported position of the rec committee per se, but it wouldn't just be and doesn't have to be just dedicated to recreation. It could be a broader scope, but those targeted items, responsibilities outlined there are the gist of what needs to be managed in the town in one grouping under recreation. Doesn't say that's all they can do. I'm sure if we get a good grant writer,
Oh, they'll be busy.
there's other work that could be
With
done.
every position, we talked about it with the town planner being a grant writer. We talked about it with assistants to administrators being grant writers. I just know, having gone down that path with a nonprofit and trying to hire grant writers, sometimes that's not always the easiest thing to do. It takes an expert in some of those things
Yep.
to get successful grant writing. So I'm wary of that. But I really think that this is a path to go on under a town administration, because town administration knows their budgets, and it was a dropped ball between a committee, but no other committee has maintenance money to have to do. Maybe they do. Does the Trails Committee have maintenance money? Do I stand correct? Do they have maintenance money?
I think so.
I don't know.
I think there's some
No.
Trails Committee money out there too.
And a lot
But-
of
but-
and a lot of the maintenance stuff for recreation, Pete has always managed as things
Right.
break,
Mhm.
like, oh, look, we need a new slide.
Bring in chips.
We
and
need a
stuff,
new, yeah, chips,
stuff
slide,
like that.
play on equipment, like,
Mhm.
Right.
it's not like there was just like, hey, we're not doing anything with this money,
So
like.
that's not that, just, that's not what I meant by
Well,
that. It is not what I meant by that. What I meant by that is it is a confusing situation with is highway doing the maintenance and responsible for that budget too? Is it the rec committee who is responsible? Is it town admin? So I think if it stays centralized with admin and admin has communications with the rec committee, that works along with Pete. So however you set up your admin positions and what their job descriptions are and roles are, I know you're in the process of shuffling that around. I just think this should be in the shuffle and it should be part of it. And I support it being part of it. And that would definitely justify any future expansion in FY26 of those administrative roles to help support these areas and not put it on a committee to be responsible for a budget.
Well, no, it wouldn't necessarily, unskilled labor like us on the committee wouldn't be doing that, but by having a town liaison, I really think that there could be a lot more volunteer work, development, communication and public outreach through this position. And that's ultimately the goal is, we had a lot of people serve on that rec committee for the last 4 or 5 years that I've been on it. And none of us really were dialed in on what we're doing and specific task oriented work.
Mark, I watched a lot of your meetings, I was there because you
Yeah.
saw me. And that was the number one problem, was follow through. When you guys set up the snowshoe program, for example, okay, somebody's got to get the snowshoes, somebody's got to put them out, somebody's got to do all the things that were discussed. But everybody there had a day job.
Yeah.
And there was no person that had
Well,
that.
the obvious
continuity.
solution is get them all fired.
Hire them all.
Yeah.
Yeah, but there you go. But the continuity wasn't there to follow through on a lot of things, and if they weren't followed through, then they didn't succeed. I
And that's-
also know that the Huntington and Bolton people brought a lot of grant writing capabilities that we don't have here. Just
A lot of brain power
yeah,
and
there was.
and
And
effort.
I tell you,
Yeah.
I mean, Carrie, I have a different opinion because I've seen them work, and
How many grants did we get?
I didn't apply for them, I didn't read them, but I know they were discussed, and I know they were acted on, and they were submitted, so. There were VORAC grants, for example. That was one of the bigger ones.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 items left on the agenda. It's already 9:36 at night. We are replowing already plowed ground. I would suggest that I certainly agree that having a staff member to take these duties would be good, but I think we will need to look at next year's budget to see exactly how we fit this in,
Yeah.
and I would suggest we move on.
Okay.
Yeah. Anything else, Mark?
Nope, other than, I'm available for any, questions. I think that there could be a lot of bang for the buck
I
in
agree.
this position.
I agree,
So,
Mhm.
whatever I can do to move that along.
Okay. Well, I guess if you and Josh are talking further refinement or details or whatever, go ahead. I mean, Josh, you heard us three say that, we're thumbs up, so. Whatever that means.
Good luck with the rest of these guys.
Thanks.
Okay, thanks.
Have a good night.
Thanks.
So next is consideration of selling a fire department pickup truck to the Water Resources Department. So this pickup truck is used as a brush truck and it's has been replaced with a new truck purchased by the fire department. The current pickup truck in Water Resources is deteriorating and at the end of its useful life, it will not pass its next inspection in October. The book value of the fire department truck is $19,643 and $22,004.
Somewhere in that range.
Somewhere in the range.
Five figures.
I don't have my glasses on, so,
Okay, well then. doesn't matter.
no.
$19,000 to $22,000 is the blue book value.
Thank you. We know the maintenance history and the use of the truck since it's been owned by the town since it was new. Water and wastewater superintendent Steve Cote believes a truck of this quality could last the Water Resources Department another 10 or 15 years. What would it take to get Water Resources into this truck tonight?
Okay, so we discussed, the three of us, well, you're not on the committee, but you were there.
I sat over there.
It was on the Water and Sewer Committee, and one point that was brought out was that could we get a little more money if we put this just on the open market, for bid? We might maybe get a couple $1,000s more.
Maybe.
However, if we then were to custom buy, because as you said, the current water truck will not pass inspection. We would need a new truck. So when we looked at how much it would cost to buy a new truck and customize the box and have everything, it would cost substantially more than that hypothetical $2,000 we'd make by selling this truck on the open market. I think economically it makes sense to transfer the $20,000 to the fire department reserve and get this truck to the water department. I think that just makes sense.
I will say, having spent some time on the Water Commission, in the past, Water Resources has fallen into a rabbit hole of, we can buy this vehicle, it's old, but it only costs this much money. And then we put a lot of money into it and scrap it, and we're not realizing a savings.
Right, this truck only
Save money today and
this
spend it
truck only
tomorrow.
has 16,000 miles, and we know intimately the status of this truck. I think it would be a good move for Richmond taxpayers to do this and not just sell the truck on the open market.
I agree. This one has some longevity available. Any other solutions, either a whole lot more money or not near the longevity. So.
Are we ready for a motion?
Yes.
Great idea, but have you had a mechanic, when the fire department is selling it for a reason, did you have a mechanic already look at it to make sure David's concern has already been taken care of?
Yep.
So that, we didn't hear that part. You may have talked about it during water. And
I'm
sewer,
sorry,
so-
yes.
Pete,
it has been
Pete's
written.
looked at it, and Pete knows the history, Pete works on it.
Yeah.
He undercoats it every year.
Beautiful. You could have said it in an early meeting. I just wanted it on
No,
record.
it's good. It's
Yeah.
late and we're tired, but yes, that is a good question.
We've owned it since new. It's been oil undercoated every year.
You're good.
Salt's been washed off. There's no rust,
Right.
low miles.
What's the dollar amount that you're thinking about transferring?
Between 19 and 22,000,
20,000.
20,000 round
That
number.
was
Yeah.
the chief's recommendation on this as well.
It's
And-
got the utility bed on it already, so it's ready to go.
And right now, just capital plan wise, there's not even an amount in there because the resale of fire trucks is fairly volatile.
Yeah. from one
Yeah,
hand to the
so
other.
any of this money, it's usually we would trade a truck in or go out to bid for sale on it. But on the fire truck, there's not even an amount in the capital
You just need
plan.
to have a number to know which.
Yeah,
what-
because we really couldn't
Take it
pin
down.
like how much we're resale for, right? So this money would be extra revenue for the fire department. And then in the budgeting process, we could talk about moving that into a reserve to help offset future costs of capital purchases.
I'll make a motion for it. Mr. Chairman, I move that the town, let me find the line here.
81.
Yeah. Well, oh, the motion? I'm not ready yet. So
Oh.
on that, it's my computer shut off again.
Oh, I can read it then.
Okay, why don't you do it?
Thanks. Mr. Chairman, I move to approve the sale of the fire department's 2009 Chevrolet Silverado 3500 HD regular cab truck to the Richmond Water Resources Department in the amount of $20,000.
I will second.
No, I support this, so don't get me wrong, I just wanna make sure the steps along the way.
Totally.
You have to go out to like bid, that whole bid process when you're selling something, is there a workaround with that when you're selling it to your own?
It's basically it's an internal transfer.
Yeah, because it's one department to the
It's
other.
transfer of an asset.
Just wanted to identify that for the public as well, so that there is a tool for you guys to be able to do this, so that's all good, so nobody says it.
Okay.
Perfect, thank you.
Any further discussion?
Mm-mm.
Hearing none, calling the motion to a vote, please identify yourself and signify your vote.
Lisa, aye?
J.I.
Adam, aye.
David, I. We just bought a truck.
No,
Maybe
sold
I
the
don't
truck,
wanna-
you're the select board, you
That
sold
too.
it.
Okay, next is discussion of an update on Buttermilk's rental revolving loan fund application to the Vermont Housing Finance Agency.
Wow. They pretty much dug a hole and threw the whole thing in by their letter.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, so after I
Hmm.
published the agenda, I got an email from Buttermilk that said that they'd heard that they were not approved for the funding.
Right.
So there's really, the update has changed a bit since actually, I think I forwarded it to the board,
Right, it was kind of a depressing letter.
but yeah, so there's no, no funding to consider. Basically, the initial letter from Buttermilk was that should they be approved, the 5 items that were in the letter from the select board a couple months ago would need to be acted on rather quickly to finalize the funding, but a lot of those would take months to enact, which is, I think, part of the reason why the funding was denied, was because they knew
Yeah.
changing zoning takes a long time. Committing to some of the funding that the town would need to commit to for the project would be a very long
it was
conversation.
gonna be a
If-
tough issue. Okay.
Yeah, and there was a couple other items in there, I think, that would take a decent amount of time. So I think, if there's to be a next step, the select board could consider, would you want to move forward with those steps so that future projects like this could be considered in a loan? But that's kind of another agenda item to see if you want to
Lisa,
work
was
on
this
that.
what you were upset about one night when you
Right.
came in that a letter went out?
Me?
Is this the topic that upset you that a letter went out?
Yes.
Okay, I'm just trying to connect the dots, that's all. No
Yeah,
other
I'm
question.
gonna try to leave that in the past. I don't,
I'm
but
just trying to understand
That's
if
the one.
this was the
Mhm.
project. Thank you.
it was because
You didn't know.
we were trying to react, we as a town were trying to react to something that we didn't start, and there was no real alternative. But what Buttermilk, kind of the scene they created, was that they needed us to act by a deadline that we had about a day or so to think about. And if we didn't act, their project would just fall flat. We couldn't take the chance of that happening, but it's kind of happened anyway, but it's,
Thank you.
as it turned out. And I guess I'm not maybe surprised, but I don't think we did the wrong thing. We didn't do the right thing either. It's just a thing.
And now it's kind of moot
Yeah, it is.
as far as action.
Exactly. So I guess there's really
No action
nothing to
today.
take on this, yeah.
No,
And I apologize for ranting at everybody, by the way.
I don't think
I know you're
anybody
used to it,
disagreed
but-
with your right to have your opinion.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's, I keep thinking about that though.
The black and white world is a very gray place.
Can I quote you somewhere? Okay.
Okay. Did that. Review of local regional input questionnaire regarding maintenance and or replacement of bridges on Interstate 89 near exit 11.
Oh, God, bridges of Chittenden County. Really.
see, this is a very early outreach by V-Trans. Let me, I think it's
You
easier.
can take all the bridges out at the same time, right?
Well, yes, I don't know that they're gonna do all 4, but where's the map? The map.
As long
is
as they
the
put in a
easiest
path
way.
underneath it, we're fine.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah, it's a good time to slip that in there.
Well,
Now's the time.
Yeah.
I think this is one with the map on it.
Does Kenyon Road really need a bridge?
So they're looking at
Needs a
4 bridges here. They've got a bridge that goes over Kenyon Road, bridge over Johnny Brook Road and the Winooski River. A bridge here over Verberg Lane and the railroad track, and there's another bridge here that's over Route 2, and these are all on I-89. So I'm sure it's a couple years down the line, they're looking at renovations or replacements of these bridges. So part of that process is reaching out to the local community to ask, what are the local concerns, what are the local considerations? So they ask about, are there any events? Are there any municipal buildings nearby? What would, traffic interruption do for businesses in that area or first responders? So Keith Oborn and I filled out the response survey. Wanted to bring it to the select board in case you guys have any more feedback on things we might have missed. It's not due till July 24th. So if, you had more comments or wanted to investigate things further, we could do so. But this is our first pass at it. And that was included in the packet, but also here as well.
I mean, the conversation was had tonight with Gary and company. It's just,
What timing?
I mean, in a distance, your fingers perch, but interesting that could fit
Yeah.
here somewhere. And
This is the time to have that
it
conversation.
sure is, yeah.
Especially with that bridge on Route 2.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
If they can do that, they can do anything. So.
Well, I'm really looking forward to having that project done with the fire department, able to have level access.
Oh, yeah.
I just don't know. They've got all this, they've got so much steel in, but I don't know when they're gonna start work on
The
the,
road bit.
Placement any day.
on the,
Deck.
Yeah.
I think don't they have to wait for.
not the deck, it's when they're gonna start. Remember, there was a whole discussion of how are they gonna maintain access to the fire department and
Yeah.
yet raise the level of the road? I'm looking forward to seeing how they pull that off.
So on this, I think we could, in a separate letter to V-Trans, talk about if you're doing this project, we've got these other projects that we
Yeah.
have to do, but
It's something that costs
The-
them nothing.
yeah,
Yeah.
the response to local concerns, if you've read through, they have some pretty, specific questions that we answered, I think,
Yeah.
to the best of our ability, but if there's more feedback on we missed something or we should add something more, happy to hear that. Otherwise, I'll send this in as part of the first early process of this.
Josh, I had
Okay.
one quick question.
Oh, Adam?
Are
you
all
can turn
these
them up.
bridges tagged?
Hold up, Adam, we can't hear you for a second. We gotta turn the in-room audio up.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's not it's our audio. Okay, I think we're good.
Can we hear you
I'm
now?
just curious. Is that how that works?
We can.
Are all these bridges tagged for reconstruction or just some type of maintenance, or what kind of magnitude of a project are they talking about?
That's a good question. I was confused by that. I know about 30 years ago, they replaced the abutments for the Kenyon Road bridges, and about 8 years ago, they repainted the beams on all of these bridges. So I don't know if it's deck replacement. I don't know if,
That was
I don't
my
know.
question. I don't mean, not that we haven't.
I've looked up at the I-89 bridge that goes over.
Adam,
Two?
the
It's rotted out. I mean, it's
The deck.
rusty. No,
Oh, the
well, yeah,
birders.
It's really rusty.
so the way they described it, and they didn't, I think it's, again, very early stages. They didn't give us a ton of descriptive information other than to say major maintenance action or replacement. So whatever it is, it's gonna be a pretty big project.
Not gonna
What's
be.
that? I'm sorry.
It's not a quick paint job. It's
No.
Right, no.
something substantial.
This is structural.
Yeah.
Right.
I think the more you give them that detail on what your plans are on that bike path is gonna be key.
Yeah.
Yeah.
At the very beginning, we said, we're putting a bike path here, we
Right,
wanna work with you.
And we'll work with them with placement. I mean, a bike path could go pretty much anywhere, unlike a road, so.
That said, if past experience is any guide, we're gonna send them letters, they're gonna say we agree.
And then
They're gonna
what
send us
letter?
a plan, and it's gonna completely disregard it, we're gonna write them a letter, and just like the previous letter, they're gonna say, oh. And this is gonna go back and forth about 6 times until we have to get our state senators involved again.
So what I'll do is I'll find a spot in there. I think there's a spot that asks about, any imminent plans, and maybe I'll say, I'll cite the scoping study and include the scoping study and
Yeah.
say, this is something that the town's considering. We'd like to work with V-Trans on this project, so at least they're aware of it, and that's sort of a first volley, and
Yeah.
we can.
And maybe we're raising funds for our portion
Yeah.
of the path. I mean, it was said tonight that they want to
Okay.
do that.
Well, if they're willing to put the path in, I'll let them replace the bridge.
Yeah. Right.
Okay,
How about
I'll add that in, and if there's no other edits, I'll get this back to him and
Mhm,
we shall see where it goes.
mhm. Yeah,
All right.
kind of just, we'll just per.
Now we're on to K.
J is done. So, okay, consideration of approval of amendment to Clean Water State Revolving Fund loan related to the wastewater treatment facility 20-year study. Okay, so this amendment will add expenses to the CWSRF loan the town has for the 20-year wastewater treatment facility evaluation. These expenses were approved at an earlier meeting by the Water and Sewer Commission, and all our additional work by Whole Tanner following as a summary of the expenses. Funding assistance, 8,700, sewer use ordinance review and recommendations, 26,000, public outreach, 42,000, total eligible for CWSRF loan, 76,700. Grant application assistance, 4,800, which is not eligible for
'Cause they
CWSRF
won't give us the
loan.
grant to ask them for more money.
Right.
We've got the, you pulled the pin out of the link there.
So again, this is,
You go ahead.
and say this is really a water and sewer expense and loan, but because it's technically structured as a loan, the select board is the only board with borrowing authority, so that's why it comes to select board for approval, but this will be paid back by water and sewer users. And I think it's deferred for about 5 years after completion of the project, and this is again, just the planning stages, so engineering, funding outreach, ordinance, rewrites.
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve the amendment to the Clean Water State Revolving Fund loan related to the wastewater treatment facility 20-year study by adding $76,700 to the loan to pay for funding assistance, public outreach, and sewer use ordinance review and recommendations.
Thank you, Jay.
I will second.
Thank you, Lisa. Motion made by Jay First, seconded by Lisa Miller. Any further discussion? Hearing none, seeing none, calling the motion to a vote. Please identify yourself and signify your vote.
Lisa, I.
J, I.
Adam, I.
And David, I. Motion carries. Okay, and since it's 8:40 PM, we're now up to approval of minutes, warrants, and purchase orders.
Mr. Chairman, I move we approve the minutes from the regular meeting on June 17th, 2024.
Thank you, Jay.
I will second that.
Thank you, Lisa. This is a motion to approve the draft minutes of the regular select board meeting on June 17th, 2024. Motion made by Jay First, seconded by Lisa Miller. Any suggestions of corrections to those draft minutes as presented? Seeing none, calling the motion to a vote, please identify yourself and signify your vote.
Lisa, I.
J, I.
Adam, I.
David, I.
Mr. Chairman, I move we approve the minutes of the special meeting focusing on the Bridge Street corridor pedestrian bicycle safety, which took place on June 24th, 2024.
Thank you, Jay. Do we have a second?
I will second that.
Thank you, Lisa. So this is a motion to approve the draft minutes as presented on the special meeting of the Richmond Select Board on June 24th, 2024. Any suggestions for edits or corrections? Seeing none, hearing none, calling the motion to a vote, please identify yourself and signify your vote.
Lisa, I.
J, I.
Adam, I.
David, I. Motion carries. Minutes are passed. Okay, can I have a
I
motion?
purchase orders, wow.
Let's get the warrants out of the
I
way.
move we accept the warrants as presented. Actually, do we have to do a separate vote on the July 4th warrant?
No, if you just approve the warrants, you're good.
Warrants are warrants.
It'll be all.
Okay, I move we
included.
approve the warrants as presented.
I'll second that.
Okay. Anybody have any issue with the warrants they want to discuss?
No.
Hearing none, seeing none. This is a motion to approve the warrants as presented.
Oh, Lisa, I.
J, I.
Sorry.
Adam, I.
David, I. Warrants have been approved. On to purchase orders. First, we have purchase order 4961 to CCRPC.
For the Cochrane Road study.
And this is not to exceed $10,000.
Mr. Chairman, I move we approve purchase order 4961 to CCRPC for the Cochrane Road study in an amount not to exceed $10,000.
Thank you, Jay. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Lisa. Not seeing any further discussion, so calling the motion to a vote, please identify yourself and signify your vote.
Just one question, is that, I guess it's payable on presentation? It's.
No, they
lump sum?
bill us incrementally as
Oh,
they
okay.
proceed in the study. It takes at least a 6-month study, if not longer.
Mhm.
And this is only our match, and I don't know off the top of my head the amount that they're paying on that, but it's
Okay.
probably $40,000-$50,000 total study, and we're paying 10,000 of that.
Yeah.
I think it's like a 25% match, something like that.
Lisa, I.
Jay, I.
Thanks, Josh.
Adam, I.
David, I. Next, we have purchase order 4979 to the Heinsberg Police Department for police services for the month of April 2024 in an amount not to exceed $34,692.50.
Mr. Chairman, I move we approve purchase order 4979 for the Heinsberg Police Department. Police Department Services, April 2024, in an amount not to exceed $34,692.50.
Thank you, Jay. Do we have a second?
Lisa, I'll second.
Thank you, Lisa.
Mhm.
Not seeing any discussion, calling the motion to a vote, please identify yourself and signify your vote.
Lisa, I.
Jay, I.
Adam, I.
David, I. Motion carries. Thank you. Next, we have purchase order 4980 to the Heinsberg Police Department. And this is for police services for the month of May.
I have one quick question. Does this include chief services or is that a different?
It does include chief services, yes.
Mr. Chairman, I move we approve purchase order 4980 to the Heinsberg Police Department for police services in May 2024 in an amount not to exceed $34,337.50.
Thank you, Jay. Do we have a second?
It's 337. Okay. Lisa, I'll second.
Thank you, Lisa. Not seeing any discussion, calling the motion to a vote, please identify yourself and signify your vote.
Lisa, I.
Jay, I.
Adam, I.
David, I. Motion carries. Thank you. Next, we have purchase order 4974 to Simple Route. This is for fiscal year 25 IT services.
And this is everything for the year?
This is sort of the basic contract coverage. There are some additional charges for, there's additional email charges that come in monthly. So this is basically like the monitoring and maintenance of the system.
Okay. Mr. Chair, this is for admin and water and wastewater.
Yes.
Just that. Okay. Mr. Chairman, I move we approve purchase order 4974 for Simple Route for fiscal year 25 IT services in an amount not to exceed $22,440.
Thank you, Jay. Do we have a second?
This is Lisa, I'll second.
By admin, wastewater.
So these are the
Water
departments.
and wastewater.
So the contract only covers administrative computers and water, wastewater. So
It does not cover the highway department.
So does the water and wastewater pay us through their fee
yes,
for
they
this?
pay for their portion of it.
Admin fee or separately?
This is a separately billed. The admin fee only covers staff time. So then this is separately billed the water, wastewater for their portion of it. Yep.
Thank you.
Yep.
Oh, calling the motion to a vote, please identify yourself and signify your vote.
Lisa, I.
Jay, I.
Adam, I.
And David, I.
And then Valley Turf.
One more.
Next, we have purchase order 4894. It's a Valley Turf Services LLC. And this is for maintenance of the Volunteers Green Field after the July flooding. I can't read the amount.
19,140. And
So when was this work done? Was it done last summer, a year ago?
No, so yeah, we got it done this spring,
So
actually.
this
so
actually
part of
includes
it.
also the damage that took place in December.
Yeah.
It's all related back to the July flooding because it's all going to be
Mm.
covered under FEMA.
Okay.
So,
Right.
so yes, and they think he still has a little bit more to come back. He kind of came here right when the weather broke, got the field mostly playable, and now there's some finishing work that still needs to be done.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve purchase order
Something.
4894 to Valley Turf Services for baseball field repair in the amount of $14,140.
19,000.
$19,140.
I probably didn't close my 9. My third grade teacher is still yelling at me.
Yeah. Lisa, I second.
Thank you, Jay. Thank you, Lisa. Not seeing any further discussion, calling the motion to a vote. Please identify yourself and signify your vote.
Lisa, I.
Jay, I.
Adam, I.
And David, I. Items for next agenda, a number of things are coming back.
Mhm.
And I didn't take notes.
I've got a bunch of notes on things, so.
One of the things we've got to do is take that corridor, Ridge Street corridor thing and prioritize or something, shape it into something more actionable.
Yeah, you keep it rolling.
And we expect to hear back from our ad hoc committee
Mhm.
on membership size and any people who want to be appointed.
Yeah. Ah, good point. Yeah, that should be a separate.
Although that was probably already on Josh's list. Also review of July 4th. And
Oh, right. Yeah, it will be history by then.
it will, well, unless they reschedule it. But
Did the ad hoc committee have a name?
Fred,
Is it
The
ad hoc bike path?
the Bresser gang, maybe?
the Recreation Path Ad Hoc Committee is what I would call it. I didn't move that, but if it,
It's clear that it has to be bike path. I mean, I think that's very important.
I'd prefer to call it a recreation path because it's for pedestrians too.
Can you put a front dash bike so that they know bikes can be on it?
Recreation implies that. Trust me, it does. The recreation path in Burlington is called the recreation path, not the bike path.
How about the
I call it
two-leg,
bike.
four-leg, two-wheel path?
Any items for executive session? Nope. So
Mr.
since
Chairman, I
it's
move we adjourn.
9:05.
I'll second that.
Accept your motion. So we're only an hour over. Okay, motion has been made and seconded to adjourn at 10:02 PM.
Yep, 10:02.
Gee, that's pretty successful.
Okay.
Vote.
Oh, Lisa, yes, I want to leave. Yes.
Say aye.
I'm in favor.
Adam, I.
David, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Sorry it ran so over time tonight.
Well, I do think we had, for the most part, good discussions, cleared some air.
I think there are things we had to do.
Yeah.
We did them.